Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast, brought to you by the Draft Professor. The Draft Professor is a group of podcasters bringing you daily draft podcasts and is home to the only dynamic mock draft simulator which allows fans to mock draft against other fans. The Draft Professor Simulator features a first-round challenge, 5 unique one-round drafts. The Draft Professor Simulator features a second-round challenge, 10 unique 2-round drafts. All mock drafts are always picking against the fans and draft analysts which use the simulator. Every mock, every pick, every time. The Draft Professor also features ranked players functionality, where you can rank your favorite players at every position. Optionally, you can add tiers to your rankings to show what round you have the players graded in. The Draft Professor also features draft a team functionality, which allows users to snake draft a team of 22 players to demonstrate your my guys, compare player strengths, and discuss draft prospects in a way no other mock draft simulator can. Thank you for tuning in to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. This episode will begin shortly. Well, welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. We've got a 3-hour marathon, 3-round mock draft that's going to be starting. But Will, Gabe, it's good to see both of you. And up until about a minute ago, I did not know that the two of you have never podcasted together before, even though you've known each other for a while. So
you didn't realize that history was going to be made, Jim. Here we are. just like Justin Thomas putting it in the water on 18, almost making history. We are tonight.
Yeah, so we've got the podcast started. I am sure some of the regulars are going to stream in here in a few minutes. But this should be fun. Did you guys see the picks that I assigned you at the end of round one?
Not exactly which ones. Which ones are we talking about here?
Okay, so this will be a good time to go over. So we have a few more admin picks than normal. So I assigned the two of you. Okay, so Will, you have obviously the Steelers. Right after that, Gabe, you'll have the Chargers. Then Bill, you'll have the Packers. And then Gabe, you'll have the Vikings. And give me a minute. And then Gabe, you'll have the Broncos. And then Will, you'll have the Lions. And Will, you will also have the Eagles.
So I got Pittsburgh, Detroit, and Philly.
Yeah, and there was one more in there.
Oh, there was. Okay.
There was Packers. You have the Packers.
Okay, I got it.
It'll be almost every pick or every other pick where you two will pretty much just be bouncing off of each other.
Okay, I thought I saw that Andy had taken Denver. I mean, I'm happy to do Denver. I'm obviously very familiar with their needs, but if he's on board and interested, I'm glad to fork that over as well.
Yeah, so I have Andy down for Denver. I don't know if I said that out loud. That was a mistake. So, Gabe, I have you for the Chargers, the Vikings, the Rams.
The Rams, okay.
Oh, and the Commanders.
And Commanders, okay.
And that's almost every other pick, which means when it gets to that point, you and Will just be bouncing off of each other. And if you guys wanted to brainstorm the pick as opposed to take control, the format is yours. I've worked with both of you for a while, so
great.
How you two decide to do it?
I don't know if I want to bounce off Gabe though. He seems very solid. I'm not.
Yeah, physically maybe, but I'm in the presence of greatness in here. So,
right on. Well, Jim, I just wanted to say, I love your you can add tiers to your prospects. When you say that in the intro, I often think of, I don't usually add tiers to my prospects until I see who my team is selected on day 3. and then it's all tears.
Is that this kind of tears, or
that's definitely this kind of tears. Yeah, I don't know. I look at what the Philadelphia Eagles have drafted on day 3 under Howie, and it's insane what they've done. Rams too. Like there's some teams that have really picked well.
Baltimore's another one like that. They tend to find those guys that everybody else has steered away from for tangible reasons, and then they end up studs for a decade at a time.
I feel like some teams just like they send everybody out for ice cream on Saturday, something like that.
Cool. Shane, it's good to see you.
Good to see you, Shane. Dead air. It's dead air, Gabe. Gabe.
I was going to say, actually, so Jim, if I share into our chat a copy of this article for those who are listening to this the first time, a couple of years ago, this is actually, it's around the time that I came to know Will through various mock drafts and things. And so at the time I was pretty active as a contributor with Predominantly Orange. I did up an article on small school draft prospects, how to scout for small school draft prospects. This is the precise audience of those who would really find that to be entertaining in a lot of ways. I won't speak so much on the writing of it, but the subject matter was phenomenal. So I'm going to put this in our chat, Jim. And then if that's something that you're able to put over into the main chat, that would be much appreciated just for the.
Great. I'm just trying to think back to like who did I talk about in there? Like if anybody worked out okay, but it would have been better to do it like when Puka Nacua was coming out, and I was been raving about him to everyone who would listen. But what are you going to do? Hopefully there was some good prospects talking. I mean, let's put it this way: I get a little bit bored with talking about the top 100, and always have never been as good at that as some people are who really focus on it a lot and watch 5 or 6 games of film on everybody and all that stuff. So I focused 25 years ago, almost 20 years ago, on trying to find value buys. I knew that was my way to compete in a marketplace where there's a lot of people after the same prizes. And so put a lot of focus into smaller school guys, less popular prospects, even from bigger schools, maybe sometimes from those like sleeper schools, like a team in a big conference that is a perennial loser, but they have a couple, one really good player. So I try to find those guys and talk about them, and then I get a little bit boring talking about them sometimes, but Gabe gave me a platform. So, and Jim as well. I mean, we talked about, when did we do the small school? We talked about small schoolers, Jim, like in September, I feel like.
Yes, I think that was October, but I think you are right.
And there were a handful of guys from that people have gotten to know since then. So that's good.
Okay, so the first 3 picks are in. We went Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, Abdul Carter, and then the rest of this is going to go really well if I don't talk.
Great. Just quickly, can I just go first, Gabe?
Yeah, go ahead.
I have Cam Ward as the number one prospect on my board, and that is not taking positional value into context. I just feel like 3 years ago, I would have picked him first overall in the draft, and he's done nothing but elevate his game more and more each year. And I think it's really remarkable what Travis Hunter is, and he would be my number 2. But I personally am taking Cam Ward every time. And I don't love the fit for Tennessee because I think their coach has gotten to be a little risk averse after he's had to watch Will Levis play for a couple of years. So I don't know how well that fit will be. I'm sort of hoping secretly that New York trades up there just so that, I get him to some place where he might fit better. But I don't know, Gabe, what's your take on this quarterback?
Well, I think my take is he's, and this is just, let me just full disclosure here. I'm a CU fan. I'm a CU Buffs fan. So I've seen Shedeur Sanders plenty. I've seen everything every down he's played, and I can tell you that Cam Ward is by far and away, in my mind, the best quarterback in this class. Now, Shedeur Sanders has a lot of tools. There are some elements of Shedeur Sanders that remind me a bit of Russell Wilson. And as a Broncos fan, I can tell you that's burned me a little bit. Will in here, as a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, has felt that. Cam Ward was somebody I liked a lot last year, and felt like last year he had a good chance to rank pretty well in a strong QB class. And so I would say, that would have been my number one overall too. He's head and shoulders above Will Levis in my mind.
I think Shedeur is a little bit like Bo Nix. By that I mean very quick decisions in the red zone, and made a lot of plays that require that sort of quick decision making. I think that's an impressive part of his game. His desire to escape from traffic or from clean pockets by going backwards is one of those things that's very hard to get over when you're used to being able to get away with that in college. But hopefully at some point he'll learn to manage the pocket a little bit better, because I think if he can, then I think he can be, as successful as Bo Nix is, but at the very least finding a good fit, finding an offense that suits what he does.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And so I think the next one, Shedeur, I think to discuss him just a little bit further, I'll say he has a problem enjoying a clean pocket. So, he does tend to find reasons to hold the ball, and he's a big game hunter. That's really what it boils down to. He's always looking for the long ball in some way. We've got a friend in a chat that we're all mutually in, who is really all about the Browns finding a way to bring Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders into the same onto the same roster there. And if you're able to pull that off, there's a comfort level him out a bunch of times. So I'm not low on Shedeur Sanders in the sense that I don't think he'll ever be productive, but I do think that Shedeur Sanders needs a little polishing. So,
yeah. Well, let's go on to Abdul Carter. I personally, when I watched him, I felt like it's hard not to compare to Micah Parsons. They were both guys that played off ball and then switched to become edge rushers. I thought Abdul Carter was maybe the best linebacker off ball. Whenever that was, last year, 2 years ago, when we started talking about him. And it was surprising to me that he moved to the edge, but it's hard to argue with the results. It feels like he is at least the quality of player that you got with Michael Parsons, and maybe not quite the speed athlete, but I think he does some other things well and uses his power a little bit more effective with speed to power.
Well, and to me, his bend really, really reminds me of Von Miller's, and that's saying something. Von Miller has a phenomenal bend, and so I think when you've got somebody who's not just athletic, but who is that flexible, good things happen. They tend to happen. So he's my number 2 player on my board. So this is, if we're talking value at this stage, I do think that, as always happens, quarterbacks push some good players down, and it started right at the top here.
Yeah, I can see having a number 2. I feel like that, for me, like I said, Ward number 1, and I would have Travis 2, and he's the next player pick. We can talk about him in a second, but Carter, anybody who ranks any of those 3, 1, 2, 3, I'm okay with that. Although I see most people have Cam Ward like 10, which has become a theme lately that's gotten under my skin. But much like you with Shedeur, I happened to watch the conference that Incarnate Word in southeastern Louisiana is in, I forget, Southland, I guess, during the pandemic, because in the spring, every one of their games for all their teams was on in the spring. So I watched every snap of Cam Ward at every stop that he's been on, even those those games against California that were hard to find. But so I feel it's much the same way, sort of identify with his talent the way that you do with Shedeur. Let's talk about the other guy that I'm sure you must be very familiar with. He plays both positions, I hear, and he's related to somebody famous.
Yeah. So on my board, like everybody, I've got folks listed in their positions, and of course, I had to come up with something different for him. So instead of cornerback or wide receiver, he's just plain listed as unicorn. Honestly, I've never seen anything like it, and that's not just from a Colorado fan standpoint. And I say that not that we've all seen players play two-way. We've seen bits and pieces of two-way players. We saw Deion Sanders do it to some extent, which there's some irony in that. We've seen a couple other players pull it off, but I've never seen anybody really, even looking at NFL executives. You watch the split on how many of them believe he should be a wide receiver and how many of them believe he should be a defensive back. it's saying something that you're that skilled in both that somebody would be willing to take you that, at this point in the draft for either one of those positions. So yeah, he has phenomenal ball skills. That his ability to track the ball, is really second to none. The only time that I really saw him get just plain bossed is by a guy that we'll talk about probably a little bit farther down the line. So I'll hold off on that. But
from Iowa State.
Yeah, so I've seen it happen, but I've also seen him make catches that are inhuman. So I'd say, this is a phenomenal pickup, and he's a wide receiver in this particular setup in my mind, just because as I look at what's there in New England right now, even after free agency, they haven't done anything to really improve that room substantially in my mind.
I mean, if he were just a cornerback, I'd still have him third on my board or second on my board. I mean, the fact that it does so much as a wide receiver for you is the thing that just puts him way over the top. But he's an outstanding cornerback. He's got great instincts. He has that thing that the really elite, confident cornerbacks have, which is he'll bait you into throws that you think you'd have all day. It's so easy, and then he's there suddenly. So I love that quality. That's a certain kind of you got to have a certain kind of like belief in yourself to take chances like that, and he's very, very good at it. Very calculated risks. Where are we at now? What have we missed? We're already following
Jacksonville. Mason Graham.
Oh yeah, there we go. What's your take on Mason Graham? Do you think he's a little undersized as a one tech, but it feels like one tech is the home for him. He's very successful in college.
Yeah, I'm high on him. I know that there are quite a few folks in our circles who are a lot higher on Kenneth Grant. I do say that Mason Graham, when he's dominant, he is absolutely dominant. One thing I can say is that it's not level of competition. It's easy to identify that he's played against some pretty big guys that we're going to see go here in the first round, more than likely, and done very well against a lot of those really big guys. So the question will be, and it'll be for either one of those cats, what kind of benefit did each experience from the other? And we won't know that until the next level.
I mean, I feel like he's younger Braden Fisk, right? That's sort of the matchup. And Braden Fisk, 8.5 sacks as a rookie, but I think you're getting a couple of years free of Kenneth Grant because he's 3 years younger, I think, than Fisk was coming out, maybe even younger than that. So that bodes well for him. But that's a little bit of a challenge to play, with that shorter span against generally longer athletes in the NFL. But I feel like he's got the right combination of stuff. I don't mind that pick at all this early, and for him to be the first defensive lineman.
Agreed. Well, let's see. Where are we at next?
Yeah, we got to go up a little bit.
There we go.
Oh, well, here we go. Here's a little bit of a wild card.
Yeah, I'd say if this is a Raiders pick through and through. Is John Gruden back? Is this yeah, are we back to Mike Mayock years?
Al Davis back from the grave. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is Shamar Stewart. Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M. Recently this has been less true, slightly less true, but generally the crazy athletes who play edge, who are good enough to be thought of as top 100 prospects and then test the way that Shamar Stewart tested, always get to a double-digit sack season at some point in their career. So it's very unlikely that they'll totally bust out. The question is, was he benefiting from playing between two guys that are both NFL players in their own right? Was he, not getting enough pressures and not enough sacks because of some fault of his, or because other guys were getting there? It's like this production versus testing thing is always going to be a thing. But I would say edge, if there's one position in the draft where testing seems to correlate more than production, that's the position. So I don't know about this high. I think I might mitigate that a little bit by saying, mid first round rather than top 10.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. Typically when we see these freak athletes like this, we're seeing them come out of Penn State, right? So this is almost that type of thing we see every year. We've seen a couple out of Georgia as well pretty recently. I honestly, knowing that he's got Max Crosby on the other side of this line, I think that's maybe what adds a little bit more, I guess I'll give it a little more benefit of the doubt in that way, because Max Crosby is always going to draw a lot of attention, and whoever's on the opposite end of that, a freak athlete like this stands to benefit probably from a lot of sacks early on.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a good bet. Like I said, it's a little pricey for me at that point to take that. So next is Tyler Warren, tight end. I mean, I'm not sure how I feel about tight end going 7 in any draft. I also think for the Jets, and I'm talking about any tight end, let's just set aside how good Tyler Warren is. 7 in any draft, man, you better be like a all pro type player. You better be what's the cat from last year with the Raiders?
Bowers.
Yeah, Brock
Bowers.
Yeah,
you better be Brock Bowers at least. He may be that good, but also the Jets. Don't the Jets have more pressing problems with big people? Like I feel like when you got this high a draft pick and your team is, near the bottom of success, it just feels like you ought to be just building the lines, defensive and offensive line. That would be me. But Tyler Warren, tell us about what you think about him, Gabe. Well,
I'm a Tyler Warren sucker. Honestly, I really am a big fan, not just as a Denver Broncos fan, but I like his flexibility. A lot of these tight ends that we see coming out fall into one of two categories. They either tend to be inline blocker predominantly, and you just pray that they might develop some hands along the way, or they're wide receivers that are bulked up who tend to. Colston Loveland is one that we'll probably see down here before too long, kind of similar to that. And then you're just really praying that the blocking comes into play at some point. But I would say, he's different in that he's an H-back tight end, can full back there. He can play a lot of different roles on a team. And so there is added value there. I'll also say I'm a huge fan of high effort, high motor guys, and that's him. And so I'd say in a different draft, to your point, I do think there's a decent chance that he would slide farther because it would be heavy, a little bit deeper at the top of this.
Yeah.
This draft is not top heavy. This draft has, I've probably got I'll say a dozen players that I feel really good about in terms of first round. There are several that are just going to sneak into this that may not otherwise. He's still a first round draft pick all day in any draft, but this high, he probably wouldn't normally. I'm okay with it.
That 15 to 50 range is interchangeable in a way.
Yeah, I would agree.
Saying great things about 40, but not necessarily great things about 18.
Yeah.
But I really like Tyler Warren. Not the greatest burst off the line of scrimmage, but his long speed is great. Effort is excellent, and as you say, versatility. Mostly H-back for me, but very, very talented.
All right, who do we have next?
Trying to catch up, but we just can't get there. It's very elusive, isn't it? Tet McMillan. I'll say this. I know there's a lot of talk about Tet McMillan not being able to beat press and therefore not, being wide receiver 1 or whatever. But I do think that, there's something to be said for just he gets the job done. I'm not sure he's somebody that's going to test great or be able to do everything perfectly. But I think you put all the pieces together, he's a good football player. As Gabe just alluded to, it's sort of at this point, whatever suits you best. If this is the type of receiver you need, I think he could be a Mike Evans type player, but I'm not, that's the sort of like the ceiling, but I'm not really sure, what you're going to get. It'll be a little bit of a risk, but it's wide receiver bust rate in the first round is over 50%. So
yeah, good point. Yeah. And so taking a look at the team that's in play here, right? So that's Carolina. They need weapons. For whatever reason, they sold off all their weapons when they had a brand new quarterback right at the beginning and left the cupboards bare. And so I'd say this goes a bit toward making up for that. I think you need talent. You need top tier talent, and yeah, he's divisive in a lot of ways, but there are very few guys in this draft with that kind of ball skill. There are a lot of different types of wide receivers, but he's definitely he's kind of in my mind, the premier outside wide receiver in this draft. So I'm good with it.
Yep. I didn't see everybody that came past. There's Jihad Campbell. He's the next guy. Or did we skip somebody? No, we did.
Membu, Genti, and Nolan.
Yeah, I buy Membu. The problem is I don't know. I guess he's going to play right tackle, I guess, right? I forgot. They had somebody they drafted in the first round at right tackle. It's probably just a good pick for them. It's a good fit. They got these guys that can move now and are very sort of take no prisoners on the offensive line, which I really love. Fuagas if they're left. So yeah, that seems like a good match for them. Super athletic, Feldman freak, and I'm not sure that he's a long-term tackle in the NFL. He's a little bit short in terms of his length, but maybe he's that guy that's athletic enough to be able to make up for that, or else he becomes an amazing guard and they need help there as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment entirely. I think there are those guys who manage to completely bypass all of the norms of what's important in a tackle and play for years. You get some guys like the right tackle in New Orleans. He's battled some injuries, but he played for a lot of years at a pretty high level. With the same deficiency, if you call it that. So yeah, all about Membu. I think that's a solid pick.
Yeah, what's the guy? Hubbard used to be Steelers and the Browns and somewhere else. Been around for a long time in the NFL, starting a tackle. It's shorter than that, so can be done. Ashton Genty. Funny, I have prospect fatigue because 2 years ago I was like I wanted to draft that guy, and then he was a sophomore, and I wasn't, or even redshirt sophomore or something. So it's like I feel like I've known him for a really long time, like the other back they had there as well. But I'm just like I'm still not really sold on even Ashton Genty at number 10 in the NFL. This career lifespan is just, chances are it's going to be shorter than you would like. And a running back to me you pick a running back in the first round. It's fantastic. If you're built, you're already there. You're right on the precipice and you're just missing that piece. That's when I feel like you pick running back in the first. Chicago, Ben Johnson, yes, he needs a guy. He needs 3 guys. But yeah, I like the player. I like him a lot, of course. They had an amazing season in college football. But yeah, that's rich for me. But I'm very picky about, the running back situation.
Yeah, I do love Ashton Genty. I think, there are some conversations we're going to have over and over again in this first round in particular about running backs. This first 2 rounds about running backs, and that's what they can do versus what they've done. For me, Ashton Genty, the question always comes back to, okay, well, how are his hands? What's his receiving game like? Mm-hmm. Well, he just wasn't asked to, that wasn't the game that they were asking him to play. And so I think, we kind of have to put a pause on that conversation until we get a chance to see it and to know. And if they're taking him at 10, my guess is they've worked him out and have a real good, feeling about that. One thing I will say is that if the Bears draft him, Caleb Williams has 0 excuses with what Chicago has done in free agency. To add to the protection around him, by bringing on a new coach that should be very friendly to him. Mm-hmm. I think you add Ashton Genty. Sure, you're going to have the question in your mind, did we draft Ricky Williams? Well, I'll say this, Ricky Williams, 90% of what caused his downfall in the end was personality. He had that mercurial sort of personality that really just sort of drove him to a place of he was unable to perform to the level that he knew he was able to. He kind of had the yips for years on end. I don't get that with Ashton Genty. I'm a big interviews guy, and so I've watched plenty with him. He's confident. He's composed. He's not going to shy away from the limelight, but I think he'll do really well. But yeah, in most drafts, yes, 10 too high for not running back. But this goes back to the same conversation as before. In a different draft, he might be pushed down naturally by a plethora of first round talent, but it's just not there here.
I mean, I think he's going to be very successful, and there's a very good chance that he's more than that. Like, he's extremely successful, has a great career. The thing that I think I just got some concerns when I say I have prospect fatigue, I was starting to get a little concerned. The couple of games he had this year against really good defenses, he did not look nearly as explosive and as dominant in those games. And I suppose that's to be figured, considering his offensive line is not necessarily matched up very well against Power 4 teams. But I do it just makes me wonder how explosive he really is in terms of NFL terms. Obviously, college terms, he's very explosive, but there's a little bit of a gap. So if it doesn't work out as well, that's where I'm going to start looking to see about his explosiveness. But I doubt that he's even going to work out. We'll never know if that's what it's about. Okay, Walter Nolan. Character concerns, apparently, stuff off the field, not necessarily like police blotter stuff, but teammate and coaching type stuff. I have a feeling what I hear is that Walter Nolan's going to go a lot lower than people think. But going here in this case to San Francisco, which is a great organization, so those kinds of players usually do all right if they go to a place that has a good environment. Like I don't know if I would send him to the Jets or Cleveland right now, but to San Francisco, I sort of buy it. Obviously, very talented. If you're looking for 3-tech action, a lot of penetrating, that's your guy.
Yeah, Walter Nolan. So first of all, San Francisco, they've pretty much gutted their team and defensively are starting over in a lot of ways. And so, yeah, going defense is a big deal. I don't recall seeing whether or not they'd actually added anyone to the linebacker room through free agency. I've been following it, but they lost Dre Greenlaw. I know that because he came to the Denver Broncos. But I don't know that they added anybody, to replace. And so having Jihad Campbell sit there right at the next pick, if in fact that wasn't done, that would make me, second guess just a little bit. Yes, he was injured, but Dre Greenlaw, definitely was a heartbeat to that team in a lot of ways. So Jihad Campbell special there. I would say Walter Nolan. The thing that concerns me is it's an on and off switch with effort and motor. And like I said, motor is kind of a big thing for me. When he's on, he's unblockable. Like he's dominant. He compares himself to, Aaron Donald. And I definitely see some snaps where it looks like that, where he just blows things up. But it always makes you wonder, if you can do that sometimes, why aren't you doing that all the time? So that's my only feedback on that one.
Jihad Campbell, I think, is not getting talked about enough in this class. I feel like he has a chance to be in the same kind of category as Fred Warner or Kuechly. It's like the guy who can play at all three levels extremely well. He's a great blitzer. He's super against the run. His instincts are excellent about finding the gap and finding getting either through or around blockers. And he's been super solid coverage. He was way better in coverage than I expected for a guy who's that good downhill. What I like about him most is when he hits guys, they stop, they go backwards. He does not get carried down the field, which is if you can be great in coverage and stop guys in their tracks as a tackler, you're a linebacker for me all day. Where are we at? We're at
Will Campbell, Will Johnson, James Pierce.
I don't know. Say something good about Will Campbell, Gabe, because I'm gonna have trouble.
I know it's not coming from you.
Yeah.
What I'll say is he played against solid, if not above solid, competition his entire career and played well. Now he was surrounded by a bunch of talented football players, and so again, this will be one of those scenarios where. Okay, I personally believe that anybody who's played that many games in the SEC at a tackle position, you got to at least try them at tackle before you move them into guard. At least give them a shot to beat out somebody in camp and demonstrate that they can dominate, let's see, who did he end up going to the Dolphins? So make sure that, hey, if he can dominate Bradley Chubb off the edge routinely, then I'm satisfied with that. If not, I see him as a more natural guard, but bump him inside just a little bit. And it's just the length thing. There's my positive stuff about Will Campbell, but let's hear the other side of that coin.
Well, I think he's a super competitor, and as you said, played great competition, and he's a really supposed to be very hard worker, smart guy. So I think he'll make the most of whatever he has to have. I just worry he doesn't really have the feet to play against somebody who has speed, power, and bend like he's going to see on a week-to-week basis in the NFL as a tackle. He doesn't have the length to overcome it, and he doesn't have the feet to overcome whatever his other issues are. So I feel like that's not going to work for me. I'm not going to take the chance on him this high. Secondly, he got bullied by guys when they were head up on him. So when he didn't have an angle blocking and he was facing a defensive lineman who was his size, but head up rather than on an angle. He often had trouble holding that point, and that to me is a real red flag for guard. So here's what I think. Really solid offensive lineman in college who's probably not an NFL tackle and possibly not an NFL guard. That's bad. That's what I would say. His work ethic and his overall talent, he maybe figured out a way to make it work with all that because guys have done it. But yeah, both those things scared me on his tape.
All right, so that brings us to Will Johnson. Do we know? Let's see. Michigan hasn't had their pro day yet, right?
Two major injuries, a hip problem that we don't know about. That's the issue with Will Johnson as a player. Slick, super great cover guy, and physical and so on. Yeah.
I think my only questions on him are health, and if I can see him check those. And honestly, he's not going 14 overall if GMs aren't also satisfied with what they see on a health, from a health standpoint, because the skills are there. But that's a position where you can't skimp on speed, and you can't have somebody who can't cut. That's not going to work out. So yeah,
I don't like him going to a turf team. That's not a match for an injury guy. Just an old school notion.
Fair.
What do you make of James Pierce? I think there's a big gap for me from Abdul Carter down to here.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And in fact, I think we're debating.
And Pierce is another guy that has some, so-called character or coaching issues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we're actually kind of debating. What's interesting is both of the next two guys have some issues that that we would have to talk through and send some folks out to investigate a little bit. Yeah. James Pierce, for me, again, like I said, I'm an interview guy. Take some time to go back and watch his combine, podium interview, and there are some phrases that he uses and some terminology that he uses from time to time that demonstrates to me some team challenges, some me firstisms. Now, I'm not going to tell you that you can have an entire team full of Boy Scouts and that you're not going to have a few people who would ruffle feathers. That's not possible. But if I have a choice between a couple of positions and I'm not forced into this, I'm real hesitant to pick either of those two guys, in this part of the first round.
Yeah, I echo that. Mike Green, the stuff is more off the field, off the coaching train, and more there's some bad stuff, that's floating around. Once again, we're not private investigators for the NFL. We're not going to really know what's going on there. He said the right things during his interviews and everything. It's not like you look at him and you're just like, I don't dig this guy, but I have a feeling he's off a lot of teams' boards because chances are that even people who have done very well since they had a problem, are more likely than the people who've never had a problem, So to get into some other kind of trouble or have some other issues. So I'm going to guess that there are still lots of teams who would not take him in the first round. But as a player, he's unbelievable, man. Mike Green might be the most fun watch as far as pass rushers in this draft. Just makes it look easy. Against
and I think we'd both say that that's a rep that Josh Connerly wants back from the senior.
I was like, how much money did Josh Connerly lose on that one? He's got himself flat-footed, which is bad. But he's better than that. But that was a bad rep. Yeah,
it absolutely was. Yeah, and one thing just to add to James Pierce, the talent level is obvious. I mean, he is obviously an extremely talented player. The question just is going to be, hey, if I'm trying to build a culture, I'm going to be real cautious about what I bring into the room on that, because you're going to have to pay him big money and likely sooner than the end of his rookie contract. So you don't get very long to figure out what kind of a person they are.
No, he's Nolan Smith without the intangibles.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I think that's fair.
Kenneth Grant, in a vacuum, we don't think about what the NFL is or what he'll be asked to do in the NFL or whatever. Amazing athlete, fantastic choice for, anchoring the center of your defense. I don't know how much he's going to give you in terms of rushing the passer, if that's what you're looking. If you're looking for a guy to do it all for you in the center of your defense, not sure that's him, but I think he'll be a consistent playmaker, and he's a very good fit for a two-gap system where they're not looking for that one tech or zero tech to get upfield.
Yeah, Kenneth Grant's actually one of my favorite D tackles in this class, and not just because he's a first rounder and huge. There's a guy we'll talk about a little bit later in the second round, more than likely, who's an even bigger human being. But this guy, Kenneth Grant, to me is he's probably more of a sure thing at defensive tackle than any of the interior defensive linemen we've talked about to this point in my mind. So.
Sorry, Jim, I lost track about where.
I think we're at Nick Emanwari.
We are? Okay, great, super. I just tried to scroll that myself, which of course I'm not.
I did too.
That's what you saw me with my fingers, like what's happening? Nick Emanwari tested like that's one of the top testing combines that you'll ever see for a player at that position, especially. And we'll get to the Steelers in a second because I texted Jim with my reasoning here, and we'll get to that. Emanwari, I think he's not safety one for me, but I can see somebody being intrigued by that athleticism. He could probably do a lot of things for you, and it never really hurts to have a guy at safety with that. In the NFL, that's a better skill. It's better to have somebody multi-tool who can do a lot of stuff for you there. Yeah,
and for me, so he is. I go back and forth honestly between Emanwari and Starks in terms of 1 and 2, and it really, you and I have had this conversation a bunch, Will. So I'll just put it out here into the open, and that is, it's about fit. I mean, the truth is, when you get to a lot of these prospects, you're splitting hairs between each of these prospects, but the reality is, what's one for you is two for somebody else, and for good reason. And so, to me, if what you're looking for, example. Vance Joseph, he often looks for somebody who can flex between linebacker, like a big nickel, somebody who can flex between linebacker and safety. Well, that's this guy. Like, this guy he would be phenomenal in that type of role. Now, if you're looking just for a pure free safety, Malachi Starks, or even there are another couple that we'll probably talk about here down the line that would be better picks in that regard. But yeah, it's about fit in that way. Naturally, a huge safety in Seattle that brings Legion of Boom sorts of line. So,
but we'll ask Jim Wickens if he thinks the quality of your deep safety is important, because they lost their guys, and Cole Bishop was playing back there out of position basically. And it's like, man, if anybody understands it, it's a Bills fan. I've lost who's next. I can move on, but I'm sorry, Jim. I know you're.
No, I'll get it. I can multitask and listen. We are moving.
And
along.
right after there you go. Malachi Starks.
We're almost caught up.
For me, Starks is a better fit either as a multi-tool. Similar thing I just said about Emanwari, but he would be a better nickel corner or nickel defender, alley defender than Emanwari. Emanwari, I think, gives you a little more linebacker-ish play when he's down in the box, and then has range on the back end that Starks doesn't have the athletic range, but he's one of those cats that has the instincts, and so he's ahead of the game and therefore looks faster than he tests. So I really believe in Starks. I think he had a couple of bad games this year when they asked him to, like man cover wide receivers who were better than him. But that's not really what he is for. He's for taking away stuff in the middle of the field that's very hard to deal with, and giving you some flexibility to use them all over the place.
And for me, with Malachi Starks, if you're looking for a traditional safety, and I would say similar to what we just talked about with Emanwari, it's just, they have flexibility. They just flex opposite directions in a lot of, in some ways, one's flexing more toward cornerback, one flexes more toward linebacker. It's what do you need? Now, I wouldn't call them interchangeable necessarily, but I would say that
they're both flexible, but not the same. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Where did we end up here? We're close. We're almost.
We're going to get to the bombshell in a second.
And then Jalen Milroe.
But this talk about the Broncos fit. This is your purview, Gabe.
Okay, so Marion Hampton. The whatever Broncos fans, whichever we have listening here, if this was Andy's pick, it's a good pick. I do like Hampton. He is not my favorite back in general. I think. The one that I would have been sitting there flipping a coin about over and over again would have been Colston Loveland, still sitting there prior to, to this pick. Hampton, he does a lot of things well. but there's not the same level of explosion that I really like to see out of a running back. And I don't just mean, I'm talking about long speed explosion. I'm a bigger fan just because of the offense, bigger fan of Caleb Johnson than a lot of folks are. Not just for anybody. Again, it's kind of fit based on what it is that you're looking to do. I'm not as big a fan of Marion Hampton. I do like him. He's definitely, one of the top 3 running backs for me. But just for the Broncos purposes, yes, we just picked up Evan Ingram, but you signed him on a 2-year deal. That's you're not looking to the future for that.
And Evan Ingram's like almost a tight end.
Yeah, that's right.
So, I think about Hampton, what I'll say about Hampton, 2 things real quick. He's got a very high floor. That's what I would say about him. So once again, if you're all set at your other positions and you just need to plug in a running back that you can lean on a little bit and feed him the ball when you need to, I think he can be very good at that. My comp for him is James Conner, but like a more athletic, faster James Conner. Very similar mentality, very similar about how he attacks the hole, and also very similar that he's not elusive to a wit in the open field. He's going to get to the hole, he's going to hit it, he's going to keep running until he runs into something, and that's not bad. At least he's getting vertical. He's not messing around. Knows what he's good at. Let's get to the bombshell. The bombshell is I've picked for the Steelers in these things, I think 3 times now. And instead of picking how I would pick for the Steelers, I'm going to pick what I think they will do. I think next Wednesday, when you see footage or hear things on Twitter about the Alabama Pro Day, you will hear Mike Tomlin had dinner with Jalen Milroe. You will hear Mike Tomlin chatting it up with Jalen Milroe at the Pro Day, and like he's his best friend. And I think that's very good chance of happening. It's the kind of quarterback, when he's been describing the last couple of years what the Steelers are looking for in a quarterback. When he drafted Kenny Pickett, he described Jalen Milroe as being the quarterback that he actually wanted, that he thought Pickett could be for them. So he loves the mobility and loves the upside. And Jalen Milroe's from Alabama, which is the Steelers are very into blue blood schools. So I would hate the pick, but I could see it. And I could even see it if I squint hard working.
Well, let me ask you, since you brought it up, what would you have done had it been, not Mike Tomlin and company, but Will, what's your?
I would, me personally, I'd trade for like a lottery chance, like Joe Milton this year, like something that's just out of the blue, but like for cheap, you get a guy that has super upside, just like someone like Milroe does, except for closer to the finished product. And you give it a shot. If it doesn't work, you go to quarterback in 2026. Instead, I think since I believe they're rebuilding, it's offensive line, it's defensive line, it's these premium positions for me early in the draft. That's what they're weak in defensive line. They need backups and starters. They're weak on offensive line. They don't have a left tackle. They don't have any depth. So that's where I would have gone.
Well, and just to call that out as we're looking through these picks, what's kind of surprising to me about where we are right now is there are a ton of high quality offensive linemen sitting here still untouched.
Yeah.
Just really there are, if you're going to kind of zero in on something, it's interesting to me how many are still sitting there that maybe haven't been. And it does look like, somebody was taken there, but again, that may not have even been the one that I would have considered the highest value at that pick. So, Pittsburgh going with Jalen Milroe, it's more shocking even than last year, the Falcons surprising everybody with the 8th overall pick and selecting a quarterback after just paying millions to another.
Yeah, well, right now, it's not like they're signing Aaron Rodgers. I don't think that's happening. So I think the perception will be that they need a quarterback, and there's one available in the draft that they like, and they won't care about the value of it or the risk of it. They won't be looking towards, we can get a better one in 2026. Not how they operate. Who was next after that, Jim?
I think this is mine. This is the Chargers, right? That I'm talking up.
Oh yeah, you picked this guy.
Yes.
I didn't pick him, but I am going to talk him up.
Oh no, you're sorry. You're after this. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I'm the vocal guy on him. Colston Loveland, to me, he's one that in a lot of mocks, he's mocked to Denver over and over and over again. I spent a lot of time on him last year because he kept popping on tape every time I'd look at J.J. McCarthy. Most every special thing you saw J.J. McCarthy do felt like it had something to do with Colston Loveland in some way, shape, or form. And so I think, he appeared to fall off a little bit, but a lot of that was, J.J. McCarthy and you got Harbaugh both leaving at the same time. Things change for you when that type of, those dynamics change within your team. And so I don't think he's any different a player than he was, a couple of years ago. I do think he's going to be highly productive so long as he's in a team that utilizes, tight ends in a way that, frankly, Denver would be a perfect type of, offense for him. San Diego, yes, Los Angeles. I've been in this too long, apparently. But Los Angeles, and while we're at it, let me just put, the Seahawks back into the AFC West too. But no, the Los Angeles Chargers, they, going back to your old coach, who has some familiarity with you and who knows how to utilize you, knows what your strengths and weaknesses are. Yeah. That's a no-brainer in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I don't know. I could see a world for some teams that Colston Loveland might be ahead of Tyler Warren, depending on what you want to do.
Yeah, I believe that.
And I think he's probably a better blocker than people think of him being. He's not, the hulking, guy that Warren is. He's sort of more traditional tight end build. But I felt like Loveland was underutilized at Michigan, let's say. Even with J.J. McCarthy, still underutilized what he could be on a certain team. So
yeah,
I like him going to the Chargers. Ezra Thomas, this is not my favorite kind of corner. I think he's really talented, and he's probably going to have a big NFL career, and he'll get a lot of hype. Very good cover guy, right? Has length, has everything you'd want in a corner. The lack of willingness and physicality tackling and in the run game is an issue for me because I think that's very hard to hide unless you're only playing teams like, in your division who are all about, coverage for you. So if you nowadays, it's like you've got at least somebody in every division who really wants to run the football against you, and they will target and attack parts of your defense that don't tackle well.
Yeah, for me, this is a little bit of a rough corner draft for me on the whole. I don't, there is somebody. Let's see here. Barron hasn't gone yet, right? He's a different kind of corner. Okay, he has, but we just haven't talked about him yet. He's a different kind of cornerback. Like Trey Amos is another one who has maybe comparable to me in terms of value. I could have seen maybe going either direction there, but to need a cornerback in this draft would be hard for me in round one. If you really needed one and you knew you had to have one, this apart from if you decide to use Travis Hunter in that way, it gets tougher for me in my mind.
Well, at least Thomas wasn't injured. I think the other, other than setting aside Travis, the other two top corners are both guys that had injuries that you're not sure what you're going to get.
Yeah.
So, or other three guys actually are all injured.
Benjamin.
Yeah. You have to put Morrison in there as well. So yeah, coming off injuries for most of them.
Thomas was an admin pick.
Yeah.
And we have a couple of draft professors from the Packers. The challenge is Barron doesn't meet the Packers threshold.
Oh yeah. Gotcha.
Right.
Well, so he's not an outside corner.
Yeah.
Fair.
That was more of the reason for that pick, but I appreciate
it. And he's thought of very highly. And once again, it just depends what you're looking for in a corner. I'm a little bit particular that way. Trey Amos is I would say is like a guy that classic, good at everything. I'm not sure if he's great at anything, but sometimes you just need a solid player to plug in. I think he'd make an ideal number 2 corner. Which team did he go to? Do they have somebody already? The Vikings. Yeah, I mean, like that's a solid fit. You're just making your team better with a guy that's going to have a very high floor and can do some things, pretty well. Like I said, he's just good to very good at everything. If you don't have, I don't know if you have a different take, Gabe.
No, that's you summed it up nicely.
And then the next guy, Calvin Banks. coming into the season, everybody thought he was a top 5 pick. Did not have a very good season, I thought. Despite the fact that their team went to the championship, I felt like he had some rough games. I think even in the postseason. So not sure, about his future. It's like I would like to have seen him end his last year on a high note. I'd feel better about him.
Yeah, I think, probably similar to Will Campbell. He's a guy whose reputation is probably going to get him drafted a little bit higher than maybe he warrants when you look at some of these other guys that, and I know there are probably even a couple of these smaller school fellas that you would look at and say, hey, they should probably be in this conversation more. But when you play it, especially as we're in a world where we've got playoffs now, the whole world is watching these big name guys. And so whether or not you know anything about them, you see a guy from Texas, you think to yourself, well, that, they sniffed a championship. I mean, it was that close, so I think, reputation is going to get him drafted sooner than he probably would have.
Yeah, absolutely. Just the skimming that what comes after that. I'm sorry, I know we've gone too far.
Fella that comes to mind is
gone too far, Jim.
Yeah, the fellow that comes to mind is Minute.
Yeah. So you've got Kelvin Banks to the Texans, Luther Burden to the Rams, and Michael Williams to the Ravens.
Yeah, Luther Burden, I could see that working. He needs to go to a team like the Rams or Miami or Minnesota or now Seattle that likes to create opportunities for their guys in the slot to have mismatches against slower defenders in space. I feel like if Luther Burden can do that all day long, that's a good fit for them there. Michael Williams, he's another one that, that he's not necessarily the finished product. And I'm not sure, I don't think I can't remember if he either didn't test that great or if he didn't test at the combine waiting for his pro day.
He did have he just had a pro day and did fairly well as I recall, but
yeah, I'm just not sure what.
I don't think he tested.
The benchmarks that he ran, but that's not the same as doing a 3-cone or doing the explosion high jump, vertical, broad jump. So I would say he's somebody that I would like to see what kind of athlete he is before I'm betting on somebody who wasn't necessarily that as productive. Basically, he looked like the lesser edge rusher, pass rusher on his team. That worries me a little bit, right? And we're going to get to the guy who was opposite him that's coming up here shortly. But I don't know if you have a different take on Michael Williams or
no. That's the same. I mean, that he's not going to to the Eagles is problematic. But other than that, that's a good pick. I think our next one is Nick Scorton, and this kind of comes back to the conversation we had before. Are you productive, super productive in your own right, or is it that the rest of the guys on your line are carrying the water for you? Nick Scorton is a guy who probably he hadn't done anything deserving of being dropped in the draft over the course of time, but he hasn't really been in the headlines, let's just say, for a period of time. So I think this could be realistic that he's a guy who just kind of keeps sliding down just based on not having made any headlines recently. And not necessarily going to one of the bigger named schools, but honestly, I think if you're somebody who needs a 5 technique, I think he kind of could be that guy. He's a big dude, spent a little time in the weight room, and I think he could really, something like a Draymond Jones kind of thing or something along those lines. I think I could see that role for him.
I think I could see, well, first of all, he's a player that if you just watch one game and it happened to be a game where he was on fire, had a good matchup, you'd think, wow, best pass rusher in the draft. So he definitely has flashes at that level. And I think the unique thing about him is his size, 280 plus or whatever. So I feel like he's a team for teams that are looking for like a 4-3 D end that's got size on one end of the line, and they're going to run somebody like Nolan Smith on the other end of the line or whatever. I feel like he's a great fit for that. He could also kick inside in nickel, and you can bring on another pure edge rusher on the outside, and he'd be very effective. I love his potential in the NFL. I think guys who have that profile are usually very successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And who do we end up with next?
We got to get a couple of names after that. Let's see.
So you have Jahdae Barron to the
yeah.
Commanders, and Jahdae Barron to the Commanders, and Jalen Walker to Buffalo.
Yeah. Jahdae Barron, I'll go first.
Go ahead.
Loved him for a couple of years. I feel like even though he proved that he could play some outside corner, he's the best nickel corner in the draft. And it's no slight to him to say that he's a nickel corner. I think that's become a very important position in the NFL, much more important than even, a downhill linebacker type. So because you see him a lot, plays, 2/3 of the time. Barron, great ball skills, great instincts. And physically, I think he can do just about everything you need in that position. If you put him on the outside, I think he could be okay, but he's really going to shine as a nickel.
Yeah, so he's another one of those guys. Go pull up his interview, watch his interview from the podium, and you'll fall in love with him. Like he's a coach's dream. I think, somebody, some GM, some scout is going to spend some time with him during the pre-draft process, and he's going to get drafted higher than everybody expects. And it's going to be because of that time spent with him on the board. He's super intelligent from a football X's and O's standpoint, but his EQ is off the charts as well. So he's somebody that I could see going a lot higher than that. Yeah. Is he an ideal outside corner? No, but at the same time, nowadays nickel's a starting position in most every defense, and so if you can get you can have him on the field playing nickel all the time. You're in business. I mean, I can't see how you'd go wrong with that pick. It's a great pick.
Yeah, Jalen Walker, I don't love predicting the profile for guys who are sort of like undersized edge rushers, or is he a linebacker? Mm-hmm. But I think he's got a lot of tenacity and works very hard at his craft, in terms of building an accumulation of tools. So I suspect he'll be very successful, but that's it's rare that you get somebody who isn't, I'm not, do you think he's an elite athlete? I'm not sure, but I know he's a really good football player. So if you weigh being a good football player over being a great athlete, as far as on your defense, some teams do and some teams don't, then he may even be a great athlete, but I'm not sure we're ever going to find out.
Who did he go to?
He went, let's see. Sorry, Jim.
Which player are we looking at?
Jalen Walker.
He went to Buffalo. That was my pick.
Yeah, what do you think about that, Jim?
I've never seen Jalen Walker drop to Buffalo. Yeah, so I'm really curious how this is going to go over.
Yeah, well, that brings us to the next pick, which is the steal of the first round so far, Derek Harmon. We let the Chiefs get Derek Harmon. There's something wrong. This guy is about 20 spots too low on everybody's board that I've seen. I feel like he's sort of, as I'm a Steelers fan, I look at him and I see young Cam Hayward. I mean, that's what he looks like. He plays with that kind of like motor and has the same size and athletic ability. And just, if there was ever a guy that you just look at drills, you don't look at testing, don't look at the 40 time, don't look at anything. You just watch him in the drills that they do at the combine. That guy looks like an NFL player more than most of his contemporaries do. So I love that pick for Kansas City.
Yeah, somebody says on here, Derek Harmon is my DT1. So you've got
company. Shane, I'm with you. I'm like yelling, like Shane's going to have a hard time hearing me if I don't yell. Sorry, I don't know.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jim, we tried to get that first round in an hour. I know that's the benchmark, and we missed by one.
We were so close.
Well, but we're already 8 picks deep into round 2.
I know. We'll catch them because we're going to skim, a little bit more or less detail.
You guys are doing awesome.
What was what was pick 32?
Izaraku, I believe, to the Eagles.
Oh yeah, okay. I don't know.
That makes sense. I mean, I don't have any real heartburn with that pick to the Eagles. I would have. It had been interesting to me. I was asking about where Walker went because I was thinking of him in terms of the Eagles, being right near there, and you kind of wonder, hey, if you're 2 picks away from that, is that somebody that that you kind of go after because they are comfortable? I mean, it's more than just a joke. They are comfortable with what Georgia produces. They're comfortable with the fact that these guys know each other. That there's
But what I would say is Milton Williams is the piece they need to replace.
That's true.
That's not a replacement for him. And I would have said, I'm not sure exactly who that guy is, but Harmon was pretty freaking close. So if they were going to move up for somebody, that would be a more likely player to move up for. But I could also see them going like guy we have whose name I don't think we've seen yet, Darius Alexander, something like that. Some real, ass kicker defensive tackle who's going to, wreck games in the context of that defense. That's probably where, based on free agency, where I would like to see them go.
Yeah, Darius Alexander would have been a phenomenal pick there.
Who's picking for Philly? Is it somebody that knows them well?
It's admin.
It is, okay. That old admin always making these picks.
So we've got between Andy, Drew, and me, we're taking the admin picks so that you guys can keep doing what you're doing.
You guys are killing it because it would take us 3 years to get through the class. What's who was 33, Jim?
So a run on tackles: Josh Simmons to the Browns, followed by Josh Connerly to the Giants.
Speaking of steals, oh my God,
yes.
Josh Simmons in the second round. Like, what is this world coming to? People, it's like out of sight, out of mind. When the guy was healthy, he was everybody's choice for tackle number 1 this year, and now dropped all the way to 33. I like his game. He has very few flaws as a college player. Maybe he just didn't play a full season and didn't miss his chance to be exposed in the playoffs or whatever. But I feel like that's one of the safer picks at left tackle.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's just a matter of, again, all the medicals check out. Is that something you feel comfortable with? If you feel comfortable with it, he's a steal at that point.
I heard he's 100%. So that was a word from the combine. Whether it's true or not, that's what I heard.
It's true today.
Anybody pop out at you from that the next couple? Let's see what we got going here. We could alternate them, Gabe, too. That might make it a little faster, right? So
Golden,
Connerly,
the Titans.
Yeah, I can talk Josh Connerly
sure.
a little bit. Yeah, so Josh Connerly, in terms of whether or not that fits what the Giants are looking for, I couldn't necessarily tell you, but what I can tell you is that Josh Connerly is a phenomenal athlete at that position. Watching him at Oregon in live action, he's going to catch a lot of flack for getting, snow plowed by Mike Green at the Senior Bowl, but on tape, that kind of thing doesn't happen to him.
No,
he's a great lateral mover. He hits with a lot of pop. I'd say you could do a lot worse than have him as a blindside protector for a lot of years.
He's not going to make that mistake again.
No.
Matthew Golden to Tennessee. That means they got Cam Ward and Matthew Golden. As was said in the chat, that's Drew winning the draft. Matthew Golden and Cam Ward, congratulations. The Golden, I think, has a good case for being the top wide receiver in the class.
He's working his way up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure he's really the guy you want to have facing a really good press corner in the NFL with more size than he has. But I think there's plenty of opportunities for him as a Z, plenty of opportunities for him even as an X to get open early on routes. So not everybody is going to be able to play, up on top of him. And if he's paired with a great quarterback who could deliver the ball wherever you need it, like Cam Ward can anticipate, he's going to get open quickly or at times break open as the ball gets there with a quarterback like that. A really good choice.
Yeah, and there is something poetic, or there was something poetic a little bit about Matthew Golden outrunning Isaiah Bond after Isaiah Bond, called his shot ahead of the combine. So I it's an underdog story. I do think that he's climbing up boards and not just, it's not an artificial climb. He's just, people are paying attention to him. And honestly, he came on at the right time.
Yeah, had a great postseason. That always helps. What was next?
So, Will, I'd like to interrupt because I've just done a couple of admin picks and I was sniping everybody in the chat. So, you
on brand, Jim.
You experienced this with me before. But, they are seeing Jim the sniper. In the chat. So.
Yeah, you climbed the tower at the University of Texas. Back up. Let's see what we got here.
Did you get Rebel to the Jaguars?
Yeah, Rebel. I heard a medical this week from an NFL source from someone in an NFL medical department who told me that the concern with him is that he's bone on bone right now on his knee. And there are some other guys in the NFL who have played that way. I think Darnell Washington with the Steelers has played excellently for them and has a similar condition and is 300 pounds. So it's probably not, a deal breaker with Rebel, but that's what you're dealing with his knee. I love him as a player. He is long. I would say without injuries or any medical situation, setting aside the helmet, he's the best corner that I saw against who we got to play. He didn't get to play necessarily all the competition, but man, he was amazing.
Yeah, and somebody in the chat here not long ago was clamoring for him as to belong in that conversation of those top corners. And by talent alone, yeah, he does. But fair or unfair, medical's kind of the great equalizer. So let's see here. Where are we?
By the way, I was just going to say about Ezeraku, I don't love his fit with Philly based on what they needed, but I didn't get a chance to say that I think he is the top speed, edge prospect in the draft in terms of how he tested. He's the only one that really easily qualified for that this year. So that's a huge plus for picking a player like him. I just saw that come up in the chat. All right, so where are we, Jim?
Let's see.
I know this. I've learned a secret to this now.
Will Howard to the Raiders.
Yeah.
And Xavier Watts to the Patriots.
You want to take Howard, Gabe?
Sure. So Will Howard, the playoffs were a beautiful thing for him. He looked like an NFL prospect during the playoffs. That was, you couldn't have picked a better time to shine on a huge stage for everybody to see. He didn't look quite the same throwing on air at the combine even. So I would say since then his postseason has not looked quite the same. Now the underwear Olympics are highly overrated in terms of what somebody's capable of doing. I care more about what you do when the lights turn on. With Geno Smith just signed to the Raiders, or traded to the Raiders, I think that's a good fit because he is a guy who could probably use a little bit of time. Geno Smith is a very selfless kind of football player who has done his time on the, riding pine himself and supporting somebody. And so I think that's a good fit in that way. I think Pete Carroll's a good fit for a guy like that as well. So yeah, from a pure team fit. Yeah. And he's got a lot of potential. He really does.
Yeah. I've forgotten now. I gave you that and was holding the other one in my mind. And while I was listening to you, I forgot who the next pick was.
Oh, Xavier Woods, I think.
Like that's my safety number
Watts.
one.
Xavier Watts.
I think Watts.
The other W.
I think he's the best safety that's available this year. I love Malachi Starks' game. I love Evan Warrior's athleticism, but Watts makes plays and does it in ways that are less common to find for safeties. He's a guy that can play deep safety and still make plays down in the close to the line of scrimmage. And that's the kind of thing that you don't see that often, and especially in this draft class, not a lot of guys like that.
Yeah. In this, I'll call her out because I wasn't here, at least trolling around in here somewhere. But Jolene is a big fan of Watson. I think honestly, he does belong in the conversation of those top safeties. That's not something that we should really shy away from necessarily. But the other two are just freaks of nature in other ways, and that's a tough thing to overlook. But yeah, playmaker.
And I think Tyleik Williams was the next player. I'm not sure what team that he went to. It's an amazing defensive tackle class, and it's all about like what suits what you're looking for. In this case, he went to the Bears. I really like Tyleik Williams, and I think he's got room to improve his game. He's still very young and kind of still growing into who he is. You would see in the most of the time he's a very solid run defender. Right now, I think he's capable of being a solid run defender in the NFL. His chops in the pass rushing or pushing the pocket still got a ways to go. If he gets an angle and gets a crease, he's proven to, she flashes on tape, but I think that's something that he's going to get better at in the next couple of years.
Yeah. Next guy is Darian Porter. He's a huge human being for his position. I think the question, long corners, they're beautiful, and they also pose, problems in terms of feet and that type of thing oftentimes. And so he's a freak of nature, and somebody's going to love that. I wouldn't be shocked if after a period of time, though, if he ends up in a position change or something along those lines, somebody gets tempted to to try to keep him around the league. There have been some guys like that. Lamar Jackson is one of those guys who's, sat around the league for a long time because of that crazy length.
All right, hey, this is what you've all been waiting for. Gabe and I are going to disagree about a prospect. Hey.
Yes, go ahead.
Darian Porter just had a 4.04 shuttle and a 6.71 3-cone at the combine. I think his movement skills are just fine. His movement skills are better than like Tez Johnson, like guys that are tiny, slot type guys. I think sky's the limit. Very less experienced guy, but he's the best athletically corner in this class, and it's just a question of a converted wide receiver. He's all those things that are like little check marks that people seem to have success with in the NFL.
Yep.
So I'm going to bet on him. Also, as opposed to what I said about Ezra Thomas, very physical as a tackler and in the run game and screen game, which I immediately like. There's one of those things that makes me excited to watch a cornerback prospect, Steve.
And that is encouraging because a lot of times, you get these guys that are gigantic and they're disappointing on that front. They don't bring the physicality that you would hope comes with the size like that. So yeah, that is an encouragement for sure.
Yep. And next would be the mystery. For a second there, I thought we were catching up, but
there we go. Yeah, we're getting close, but they're picking twice to our one, I think.
Okay. Yeah. So Egbuka to the Bears, Landon Jackson to the Jets.
Okay. I can go with Egbuka.
It would do it, man.
So Emeka Egbuka, again, this is another one of these. You give this to Chicago, the excuses start to dry up. Already the cupboard was pretty full last year in that way, at least from a weapons standpoint. This should be a long-term pairing. Emeka Egbuka is one of those guys I've had a hard time really falling in love with. He does a lot of things really well, but there's not a lot of flashy to him. He's a good blocker. He's a good team player. He's a phenomenal interview. He's a guy that, again, you'd love to have on your team. I wouldn't be disappointed even if he went at 20 to the Broncos. At one point, he was mocked there several times. I wouldn't be terribly disappointed in that. It's just he's one of those guys, and I'll comp him to a Bronco. There's a guy by the name of Rod Smith who played years and years and years and years with the Broncos and should be in the Hall of Fame if we're making arguments about that as an undrafted player. But there wasn't anything that he did that was spectacular. It's just everything he did was solid, which I think cost him in the long run because flashy is what you sort of look for in that way. And when you've got that, a freshman phenom on your team who makes everything look like like the next coming of Randy Moss, that's a little bit of a challenge as well. But I will say he is at this point in the draft, he's a steal. And a really, really solid all-around player.
Donovan Jackson, I think, is the next guy guard going to the Bengals. There's some people who think – actually, we skipped a couple. I'm so sorry. We'll get back to him in a second.
There's another one. Yeah.
It's Landon Jackson. Wrong Jackson. Landon Jackson also tested like a stud and is way more productive than a guy that is only a combine warrior. I think he's a very underrated edge rusher. Once again, because he's bigger, it's not that flashy, like speed bend the guy, but I feel like these very powerful, explosive 280-pound guys can be amazing contributors to a defense. And he made a ton of plays. He was always behind the line of scrimmage making plays, like Landon Jackson a lot.
Yeah.
I didn't see
my only real beef with Landon Jackson, and he can't do anything about it really, his size, he plays a bit upright at times. He's not a super bendy kind of guy. He had good straight line speed. Clearly, he had good strength. His one-on-ones at the Senior Bowl were promising. He showed a lot of promise in those. Played against some top tackles that we haven't even discussed yet that we really should be probably by this point discussing, and dominated oftentimes. But yeah, really good guy.
And
great picture. Let's see. We went Jackson to eyeballs.
I'll get you. Benjamin Morrison to the 49ers, Tyler Booker to the Cowboys.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
Booker's massive. I don't think he can move very well, but for a system like what Dallas seems to like that kind of guy. on the offensive line. Just more like a very solid wall, but not necessarily going to give you a bunch of like pulling and whatever. But I think he seems like a good fit for that situation. I kind of like guys who can do it all at this point in the draft. If you're a guard getting picked in the top 50 or so, I feel like you should be a little bit more well-rounded than Booker, but Booker is pedigree and can play.
Yeah. Real quick, kind of going back to the comment that was on there before. I'm a big fan of Daniel Jeremiah. He, in fact, he's an alumni from the from the school that my son's attending right now. But during the draft, the comment that he made about Landon Jackson playing like his hair is on fire was really uncalled for, and I bet he'd wish he'd had that that series of comments back, since poor Landon Jackson can do nothing about the alopecia that makes him have no hair in the first place. So, come on, Daniel Jeremiah, you can do better than that.
There have been some very good NFL players with alopecia.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, as a matter of fact, it's maybe that's something we should be looking at. Somebody should be doing some stats on that.
Right.
That was Ryan Shazier, famously.
Yeah. Where do we come from? Where's our next?
Jim is really, he likes to move
moving and shaking.
By the way, just a piece of advice to people: never watch anyone else operate a computer. I mean, it's just one of those things that will make you learn to hate your wife, your siblings. Yeah. Anyway,
so Mason Taylor to the Colts, Carson.
Yeah, Benjamin Morrison. Just quickly before we get to Mason Taylor, Benjamin Morrison. I feel like I didn't love his tape. When he has to flip his hips or come across the field, I feel like that injury, the old injuries, are an issue with him. And the fact that it showed up again this year makes me very worried about his prospects in the NFL. He may indeed go lower than people expect because of that. But you watch him on crossing routes, and it's like when he has to like change direction and start going, bursting to that, 90 degrees, he had a very difficult time with that, which for a top corner is a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, another one of those guys that, without the injury, we're not talking about this low. He's gone, a while ago, particularly in a draft that's struggling to find top tier first round talent.
You've been looking at tight end. What'd you think of Mason Taylor?
I think we're at Mason Taylor to the Colts.
Yeah.
So this is it's sort of a match made in heaven in a lot of ways. At this stage, the fact that Mason Taylor's there, a lot of people are talking, about him a lot higher nowadays. For somebody like you, Will, who doesn't really know, you're not really sure quite what to do with Tyler Warren in terms of how you feel about him. Mason Taylor is a little bit more of a straight stick. You get what you would expect out of a traditional tight end. Has great hands. Obviously, the pedigree's there. I think, he's going to be a phenomenal player for whichever team drafts him. I know that teams like the Broncos looking for tight ends have thought highly of him and spoken to him. The only thing he's got going against him is what was asked of him and where he played. I mean, I think if he'd have played in a place that really, if he's playing where Harold Fannon's playing, then we're all talking about, him breaking records instead. So I think,
maybe. I mean, Harold Fannin did his best work against the great teams. So
yeah, that's true. He did. Yeah,
I will give him that. I kind of actually really like Harold Fannin. Well, maybe we'll get to him. So he might get picked tonight. So
I feel like we ought to.
Let's see here. We can sort of buzz through a couple.
Schlesinger.
I think
Mason Taylor, Carson Schlesinger, and Alfred Collins.
Schlesinger's a great story. I mean, you think, okay, it's a try-hard guy who's, unrecruited and then turned into a star, and now he's going to get drafted in the top 50. But I'll tell you what, the tape is there. The guy is not just like some, doofus out there who's like making a lot of tackles. He can cover. He can do it all. He's another all-around linebacker, a la Jihad Campbell, and available at a much lower price because he doesn't have the high pedigree.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I don't really have too much to add to that. I think, especially at this point in the draft, I'm not really on board with the conversations that try to push him up into round one a lot more. I don't see him as that.
He's a linebacker. It's positional value is not as high.
Yeah, exactly.
But a linebacker who can be on the field 3 downs and cover people for real, not just running backs in the flat, like A+. Those are important.
Yes, absolutely. and more rare, honestly.
Yep.
So
very hard.
Yeah. Next
Any
guy.
of them, by the way, an excellent draft class for coverage linebackers. I would say.
Oddly so. I mean, it really is. My favorite day of the combine this year was watching the linebackers. I mean, the linebacker class was it was mesmerizing in a lot of ways, and that you just don't see that very often. So, Alfred Collins. So this is a pick to Arizona. A lot of guys in our draft professor group are incredibly high on Alfred Collins, and he's been, Jim, you'd have to tell me. I don't know what the highest point is that he's gone, but I recall us doing a draft where I feel like it was top 10 somewhere at one point with somebody.
He went to Arizona at 16. So here Arizona gets him in round 2, but we have mocked him to Arizona in round 1.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So he's a lot of guys who spend a lot of time watching a lot of tape have a lot of love for Alfred Collins. And so, again, this class, a lot of times you're a victim of the fact that there are so many other stellar defensive linemen in here, and frankly, so many flavors. They're all so different. It's just about what you happen to need. But Alfred Collins, I think, is a steal at that stage.
Hey, what do you think? How about we just go back to just below Alfred Collins on the draft, Jim, and just for a minute, let's give like one sentence on guys, unless you got something really important to say, and we'll try to catch up a little because I know it's hard for people to follow along. I'll start. Darius Alexander. Oh, Alfred Collins, first of all, and Darius Alexander's similar boat. They're both closer to finished products. They're both older prospects, and I think therefore their tape. And if you're just watching, if you're not thinking about any of that, I love both of them. Play with great energy and a lot of strength, and are very, very good at what they do. But I worry that they're sort of, what you see is what you get players. So some people like that. Some people like a player that has upside.
Yeah, Darius Alexander is another guy who just he's done himself a lot of favors after, the questions on those smaller school guys are always going to be how do you look against big school competition. He did not disappoint when he showed up to the Senior Bowl and started plowing people over, left and right. I think he showed he belongs. So I think he at this point would probably be considered kind of a steal by a lot of folks who've been paying attention to him.
Yeah, and I didn't see who was after. I'm sorry.
No, not a problem. Not a problem.
Yeah, give us just a quick second and we'll catch up. I promise.
Donovan Jackson.
Think he can play tackle in a pinch for you, much like a Joe Tooney type, but he might be the most polished guard, highest upside guard in the draft. Really like him. Probably would be the first guard for me off the books. And just quickly on Savion Williams, not only a great fit in Seattle with that sort of Los Angeles Rams kind of offense, but I just feel like people want to talk about him like Cordell Patterson because he can run the football as an option quarterback, whatever, Wildcat. But I think he's way better than that. He was great on deep balls. He was great in slants, great to get it open, and is also the best open field runner in this class at any position.
Yeah, that's the skill for Savion Williams, honestly. And I think he, to me, is a perfect fit for a guy who understands how to use people in multiple positions. So, I mean, I'm looking at a Sean Payton guy, somebody who tends to move people around formations and use them in different spots. He's not just a gadget guy, though. He is a little bit raw, especially when you look at him compared to his compadre there at TCU. Jack Besh is a lot more of what you would see as a straight stick, wide receiver that you feel, really, hey, he's gonna do exactly what you'd expect him to do as a wide receiver. But Savion Williams, he's explosive. Somebody's gonna again fall in love with what they've seen him do. And if you're imaginative, he's a bargain.
Jaden Higgins is a dog. He would be wide receiver 3 for me in this class. I feel like I would take him ahead of the guy from Missouri who we talked about earlier, just because Jaden Higgins can play on the outside. He can win 50-50 balls. He can take an athlete on the other side of the field that's probably better than him and twist them into knots with route running. So I have nothing bad to say about him. And
now,
I'm going to say skill that, top speed that is the best among all of the tight ends in this draft and had an amazing season. injuries and just a one-season wonder is the issue with him. Sorry, go ahead, Gabe. You can catch up.
No, Trey Harris is a steal at this point. I honestly, Trey Harris could be in a conversation to be up there with Luther Burden in a lot of ways. I mean, when you get to the they're not comparable in types of player, not even a little bit, but in terms of where they fall in the draft, Trey Harris is kind of like, I mean, in a sense, kind of a poor man's T-Mac in a lot of ways. I mean, he's a good outside receiver, and there really just don't seem to be that many of them in this draft. So,
nope.
Yeah,
valuable. Let's see.
I'll get you. I'm checking for my next pick. Okay, so they did.
Don't mind us, Jim. We're just here talking.
Oh, we're all good. We are a cross-functional team here.
Yes,
you guys are doing awesome.
Well, let me ask you while he's looking for that.
Well, Trey Harris, I actually really like Trey Harris as well. Also, people look at him as a sort of a one-trick pony, but I felt like he showed some nuance in his footwork, getting open, his releases, and getting open against press, which is another thing that was a criticism of some other outside receivers in this draft that he seems to be very good at. Jordan Burch, I know him, but I haven't really looked at him that much.
He's a big dude. Honestly, when you say edge, a lot of times nowadays you're thinking of these smaller, more nimble, athletic guys. Jordan Burch to me is a little bit of a tweener in a sense. He's probably stronger than than some of these average edge type guys. In terms of how he fits in Green Bay, I don't really know. I'm not sure what they're actually missing there on the D line, but I like him. I kind of have seen him mocked all over the place from about this point all the way, down several rounds from where we are right now. So I'm not really sure how the NFL feels about him, but big time competition in Oregon, and same stories we've talked about with Scorton and other folks. He's had a lot of help on the line around him, and we just talked about one not very long ago, and then we got Jamari Caldwell that we haven't even talked about. A lot of beef on that D line, so kind of tough to know, what was him and what wasn't.
Yeah, exactly. But I once again, a piece. If somebody's looking for that piece, that flexibility to be a 5-tech or kick out, he seems like the guy. Harrison, I feel like Maxwell Harrison, the cornerback from Kentucky, is the next pick for the Chargers.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like a good match for them. I feel like he's a little bit thin framed, therefore hard for me to put him in the slot, even though with his weight, you'd think that's where he belongs. And he's also at the Senior Bowl was really great at covering the two-way go, the kind of thing that most cornerbacks have a struggle with. So I feel like I want him in the slot to have the two-way go coverage, but I feel like he's not physical enough necessarily for that, and even missed time with an injury, I think, which is another sort of red flag.
Yeah, and I'll call out Drew real quick. He just mentioned about Burch that he's got the best long arms in the class, and so obviously at that position, you can't go wrong with that. Most of the tackles, especially at the NFL level, are that's what you're looking for. They're not all going to be these short-armed T-Rex guys that we talked about before. I mean, they're mostly going to be folks that can keep you off of them. So, yeah, that's great. Who was
the corner from Ohio State is next?
Okay,
to Buffalo.
Yeah, okay. You go ahead, Gabe. I can't really get a read for him. Like I watch him, and nothing makes me think I really want to draft this guy. Like he will not be one of my favorites, but I can't tell you why.
No, I kind of felt the same way. He seemed solid to me, but I didn't see anything super explosive about him. He did seem to remain in phase pretty well. Most of the time I watched him, I didn't see him get burned a whole lot. But I would also say, if you're starting at Ohio State, that by itself is going to get you drafted. Right. So as long as you're healthy, somebody's going to draft you.
I feel like the front seven for Ohio State as a college front seven might have had something to do with the cleanliness of Burke's. But that's, who knows? We're going to find out, I guess. But not super exciting, but he may end up being a very solid player. There's a lot of teams that really like that pedigree and sort of high floor. I feel like he's got that going for him. I lost.
Well, let me ask you while we're waiting on something here. So you mentioned Higgins a while ago. Who would be your comp for him on a professional level? When you see him play, who does he remind you of?
Who's the dude from USC that went to that's at Indy?
What's the question, Will?
The wide receiver from Southern California that's at Indy. He plays for the Colts now. Here, I'll look at the.
Yep, I know who you're talking about.
You're saying wide receiver.
Yeah,
I didn't hear the position.
Higgins,
not Pierce Pittman.
Yeah, we were talking. I asked him who would be a comp for Higgins, professionally speaking, and your comp just hit me and it disappeared.
Not Tillman. What is his name? God, sorry, guys, on the who's listening on the chat and going like, who are these guys? I'll have it here. Let's see. Our lads. By the way, shout out to our lads.
Yeah, no kidding.
People like that in the world in Draft Scout, because I use them probably a million times. I hope they get paid for what I'm doing using them. Michael Pittman. Sorry, that's
it. Yep, that's it.
I kind of feel like that's a apt comparison. They both sort of like feel longer and use a lot of tools. Very toolsy as a receiver and very dependable. I like that combination.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's see. Where do we end up here?
I'll get you. See, and you thought you would catch up, and the chat is just like going.
Flying. I know, this people are too fast.
That's a good thing.
You know why they're like that? You know why they're like that, Jim? Because they're afraid of your admin picks. That's why they're so on.
They are. Yes.
They live in fear.
Yes.
Princely.
And if that's the way,
come on, baby. Princely is like a dude. Love him. Love his brothers. His brother follows me on Twitter, who's also in this draft class. Prince is his name, and he's a five tech type playing at JUCO who's actually quite good, and maybe somebody's undrafted free agent in camp. But anyway, Princely I think is another guy's just dog, and was the most impressive person to me on that defense, which is a really great defense.
Yeah, and Jonas Avaitanea, I think to the Texans, they naturally need some offensive line help after all of the jettisoning they just did during the free agency period here. He's got some guard tackle flexibility. Same conversation as we had with the other. I'd start him at tackle, see how he does. Push him in if not, and I think he'd start for a really long time at guard if he doesn't pan out at tackle. But he plays a little nasty, and I like
that. As long as the Ravens don't get him, Gabe, that's all that really matters to them.
Honestly, I thought for sure that's how this was going to go down, but I saw a sneak peek about who the Ravens ended up with later, and I'm no more happy with it. Trust me.
Yeah, I bet. Okay, so next up,
you're not going to like it either. Sorry.
Oh yeah, gotcha. I gotcha. Oh yeah, not at all. Arantha Ersari, I love him.
Yeah.
The more I start rewatching guys and start thinking about who do I really believe in, I feel like he maybe has the best upside. You look at his size, he's like 323 pounds, whatever, and you think to yourself, all right, he's a right tackle at best, probably can't move that well, whatever. But I actually think he's the new prototype for what left tackles are going to start to look like, especially if the league goes back to running the football more. He's great on the move. It's very rare to see him. I found that if he got beat on the outside with speed, not because he wasn't quick enough, it was because he missed set. He wasn't setting for the right set for the play. Like he was trying to win with a quick set, and the play ended up calling for something a little bit longer than that. The rusher eventually got there, but I think he's got amazing size and skills and length. And if he goes to the Ravens, I will cry.
Yeah, and I think I can't recall. So I'm pretty sure that the Ravens re-signed Ronnie Stanley. I think this would be in my mind sort of a future developmental swing tackle until such point as.
Well, he played left. I think they lost their left guard though, so he'd slot in at left guard, and then you move.
Yeah, and then you could push him out. Yeah, that's a good call. Marcus Bowe, that personality fit to the Lions, if nothing else. Super smart guy with a lot of positional flexibility. I think he could play at about any spot along the line. I think, and he did very well at the combine. I be shocked a little bit if he lasts this long. And then the next one, Henderson, Trey Henderson is who we're sitting. Travion Henderson now is who we're sitting with now. Yeah. That goes to Washington.
Yeah. I don't think he's fast enough to be the kind of player that he is in the NFL, but I'll happily be proven wrong. I like him, and I think he's a really good team guy, and he handled that that role of being like sharing the duties very, very professionally in a way. So I don't have a single bad thing to say about him. I just feel like he's a speed running back who's he's like a 4.4 guy instead of a 4.25 guy like the really fast guys in the league are.
Yeah, I think the way that Ohio State used him and Judkins is kind of how I would see him being used in the NFL similarly in the sense that, hey, if you can just pair him up with the right kind of back, I think that could be a long-term sort of solution. If you're a team that's looking for a bell cow every down kind of back, I don't know yet. I mean, maybe, it's possible that he could.
I got an analogy for you. He's like the fastball after the Brian Robinson changeup. He looks a lot faster after Robinson gets the ball.
Yeah. I think that's kind of fair. As I do think that he's value at this stage. I really think that that's a good pick. If my team had picked him up at whatever he was, I think it was like pick 60 something at this stage. That's pretty good. There have been a lot of projections of him much higher, and another strong interview guy, good locker room fella. So yeah, I'd feel good about that.
Yeah, Jared Ivey. Jared Ivey is next. He's a guy that it's a redshirt senior, been around for a while, solid player. But I don't know. Like, what do you think about this fit to Buffalo? Like, there must be some reason that Jim must know that they scouted Jared. Or they like him, particularly like his style. So
we have spent a lot of time. I think you can put money on Buffalo drafting an Ole Miss player. We just have to figure out which one it is.
They like the Ole Miss. They spent a lot of time there.
Correct me if I'm wrong, though, but Ivy is one of the more – he's a large edge, right? Buffalo likes the Greg Rousseau type edges, and that's the body type that Ivy is, right?
Yeah. Yeah, he's 274, 6'6", 274. He's sort of the build of a classic 5 tech, right?
Right.
So he can run though. He's fast. I think he ran 4.59 or something. So yeah, 274 pounds that can fly. That guy, there's a use for him for sure. It's just sad for him that he got a little bit lost between Nolan and Princely.
Yeah. So Cam Williams. Yeah. I see the Chiefs as a potential fit. They definitely need a left tackle. I guess he's another one of those guys that on name and school, he gained a lot of recognition, but he's kind of fallen off the edge of the earth toward as soon as the draft process kicked off. If he lives up to his billing, that's a great pick. I'm not sure who's left at tackle in here, so I'm not sure how that would compare to what else was left on the board. But yeah, the fit from a positional standpoint makes sense.
There were a lot of people who were higher on him than Banks, the guy on the other side. So yeah. I do see that this happening maybe here. The corner pick, Noah Williams. I like Noah Williams, but I kind of feel like this is a pick where scarcity is starting to come into play now. It's like we need a corner, and we're running out of outside guys. Pretty quickly in this draft, even though there have been a lot of them taken. It's like now here we are, not even to the end of round 2, and we're on to Noah Williams. I feel like he could also, in a sort of a normal corner year, have gone day 3. So I feel like you're getting a good cover guy. I'm not sure about him. His tackling and physicality also I feel like is a little bit of an issue from what I recall. Digging back into my memory banks, it's been a while since I watched him. But as coverage goes and sort of all around cornerback, I think he's actually a pretty good choice. Up what's left.
Yeah, I need to watch more of him. I haven't really paid a lot of attention to him, if I'm quite honest. I think the next guy, though, Elik Iomanor, I'm a huge fan. He's a tough dude, and he just makes plays. Honestly, he's just one of those guys who he's not the fastest. He's not the most explosive, but somehow he manages to get open and he makes plays routinely. He's a great blocker. I think honestly, he was the dude I was talking about that mossed,
was it him? I thought it was Higgins that did it to him, but
he may have as well. But the one that really sticks out, that really, I'm still feeling the salt in the wound from that one. He had a crazy 200+ yard game against Colorado and just absolutely destroyed. Google it sometime and take a look at the Travis Hunter, versus Manor, game, and you'll see. That'll be one that he'll want to have back, similar to what we talked about before with our Oregon tackle. But yeah, he's a guy you've seen mocked as high as late first round, and as low as this. It's about fit. It's about what your team happens to need. For some reason, when I look at him, he feels like a 49ers wide receiver to me. I mean, like he just has that sort of feel to him. So, and given that they seem to be emptying their team, he might well end up in that kind of situation. So,
yeah, I feel like there's not that much difference between Amari Cooper and Alec Eleanor. Like they seem like the guys that you watch them and they're not necessarily going to wow you in shorts, but they're such good football players.
Yeah.
Next is, I saw it and I'm trying to remember right now.
Jack Sawyer, I think.
Yeah, Jack Sawyer
to Kansas City.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, I think he's another guy that's much like I said about Campbell earlier. If he goes to the right place and the right fit where they can use him and they don't need to depend on him to do things that he's not as good at. Like, I don't think you want him in coverage. I'm not sure you want him even, as a primary edge rusher. Maybe as the second edge rusher is a better choice for him. But, really good football player, be a captain of your team.
Yeah, he looks like a Kansas City Chief, and I don't just mean, like physical appearance, but like if you look at the type of player that they tend to draft, he matches the sort of high energy, high effort profile that you see in guys like let's see, what's their middle linebacker? I'll pull them up. I'll pull their roster up here real quick.
From Williams.
Oh gosh.
Sure, just help me out.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we're talking about linebacker or we're talking about quarterback?
No, sorry, my screen refreshed when we were on there.
Oh, sorry.
No, Leo Chenal. I mean, he has that sort of feel to him a little bit.
Yeah.
There's his George Karlaftis. I mean, there's like a, slightly under athletic, but playmaker, super hard or super high effort kind of guy. I could see why whoever picked them, they probably know something about the Chiefs because it has that feel. They either get those guys or they get criminals. So, this one is on the far end of the spectrum the other way.
You think when they interview him at the combine, like, have you ever thought about strangling anybody?
Yeah, right.
Oh my God. Okay,
we get any hate mail for that, Jim? I don't.
Probably.
I didn't even hear what you said. I'm like,
okay, good.
Please send your hate mail to NFL Draft Fanatic. There's no I at the end of Fanatic.
Fair.
Can you give us some back there, Jim? Go back for a second.
Absolutely.
After
By
Jack
the way,
Sawyer.
I am in full snipe mode in round 3.
Oh, great.
So we're doing quite well. So Shamar Turner.
Shamar Turner for you, Gabe. I'll take Martinez.
Okay, Shamar Turner for me. This is an okay spot for him for me, just in terms of draft position. He's another one of those guys who, to a greater extent than what Walter Nolan was, is inconsistent, but has a lot of potential. And so I could see him going higher, but I could also see him dropping even further than he is right now. I don't hate him. I don't love him, but I can see a team filling a need with him, if that makes sense. I don't have a lot of really high positive to say. It's just the motor's not always on for me.
Yeah, Damian Martinez, I think, has an argument, and you're going to say this is a little bit of a wild take. Hot takes. He has an argument for being the best running back in this class, and I'll tell you why. He played in 2 totally different systems. He played as a bigger, like a 230-pound back in a power system in Oregon State and was, all conference and was one of the best running backs in the country. He then transferred to Miami and played in a outside zone gap scheme or outside zone scheme, at 215 pounds or 220 pounds and had a 22-mile-an-hour clocking on the, at his top speed, and was also the top short yardage back this year in college football, third and fourth down conversions percentage. So I feel like there's a guy that can do basically everything, has a lot of, in the quick feet in the hole, has a high end top gear, and is a great short yardage back and great in pass protection. It's like, that's a guy who's going to play in the NFL for a long time. And then Gray Zabel from North Dakota State. North Dakota State, of course, has a reputation for churning out linemen, well-deserved. I think they got a great program there. One of the secrets to their success is their offensive line coaching. Zabel was the best. I won't even say sort of, maybe. He was the best-looking offensive lineman at the Senior Bowl. So I wouldn't be surprised if he goes round one. And here we are, deep into round two before you see him. I feel like he can play center, even though he hasn't done it that much. He's plug and play at guard, and he might even be able to play some tackle for you.
All right. I'm going to need a refresh here when you get a minute, Jim, but after you get caught up. But
I'll do that. Yep.
Yeah,
I'm checking the Buccaneers, and then I'll get you.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Gray Zabel. He stood up against stiff competition when he went to the Senior Bowl, and honestly, that for me was a question mark. And so I was happy to see it. And he did more than just stand up. He became the the matchup of choice for defensive linemen who wanted to prove their worth, which that to me says something. And they probably regretted it afterward, because he definitely earned himself some money during most of those reps. I think I maybe saw him beaten twice during all of the reps that I watched.
Yep.
And it was never badly. It was, it was something that a quarterback still could have gotten the ball out before, the guy got there. So yeah, a high on that guy.
Speaking of high at the Senior Bowl, the next guy was not so good at the Senior Bowl, and that's Wyatt Millam. I feel like this is why Millam is dropped on a lot of, he had a lot of attention and was perceived as a top 50 player. And I felt like the Senior Bowl really hurt him. The one-on-one matchups is not really his game, though, right? He's like a guy that is more of a, if you watch his film, he looks a little better than that. But yeah, he looked a little overmatched physically in some of the matchups at the Senior Bowl. But moving to guard, I think maybe for a certain kind of system might work well for him.
Okay. Yeah. And next.
Restrepo. I think we might have lost. We might have lost Gabe for a second.
Yep. Okay, so I'll get you the next couple of picks. It was Restrepo to the Saints, Ratledge to the Bears, and Dart to the Jets.
Dart. Okay. Yeah. Restrepo is one of those guys who's been kind of climbing. I think he's going to play a long time in the NFL. Honestly, he's just he's one of those who does a lot of things well, not just marginally well. He does a lot of things well, and he just gets open. And so, yeah, there are a couple other guys in this draft that we could talk about like that. But he's easy to fall in love with when you start watching the tape. But honestly, the best part of his game is not something you find in the highlight reel. When you turn on the highlight reel, it's just kind of all right. But when you actually watch every snap that he takes, he does a lot of things just really well. So I'm a big fan of Restrepo. So yeah.
I mean, I feel like he's the guy you want on your team if you got a quarterback that can make plays out of structure. Like, what a perfect fit with Cam Ward, because
that's
it.
That's it.
That dude's going to be open. Like, he has he's like that, got that Travis Kelce gene, where he can just find places that the defense isn't and figure out how to get there, So love him. Ratledge, I feel like a guy is going to be the fan base for the team that selects him is going to be like, we picked a guard. But I feel like guys like this make the NFL go around. There's a lot of guys who's offensive linemen whose names are not necessarily household names that just are solid and, they anchor the inside of your line and help out the tackle that's next to them. It doesn't have to worry so much. So I feel like Ratledge falls in that category for me.
Well, and that mullet's going to get him to the Pro Bowl for at least the first 3 years. So
he's all mullet for sure. Jackson Dart to the Jets. I don't know. What do you think of Jackson Dart?
Well, Given the Jets' options right now, I can see the pick. It makes sense to me that you would take that swing. Jackson Dart is a product of a QB-starved league. That's really the nature of it. I didn't see anything that really changed my mind about him at either, the Senior Bowl or, the Combine. There was nothing about it that I thought, in fact, he seemed to kind of miss some very basic throws. I'm not real high on him. He definitely played with some talent. I think when we go back and if we were to talk about the wide receiver, Trey Harris, again, you would say he was a beneficiary, I think, a little bit of a guy who did a lot after the catch. But
I would say Jackson Dart is somewhere on the Matt Corral.
Yep.
What was the quarterback from North Carolina? Sam Howell. Like he feels sort of in this class, like that's really pushed him up. But boy, that's a real lottery pick. A lottery ticket kind of a pick. Which we the Jets, I guess you got to do something.
Jets pick.
But boy, the history of Jets quarterbacks, really, really sad.
I have no stones to throw there, although we're doing better these days.
Yeah, they're on my television every weekend, blocking out games that I would rather see.
I'm sorry.
Let's see, and then that's all I wrote down. So now I need another refresher, Jim.
Yeah, that's all I wrote too. We're at Dart.
Here we go.
TJ Sanders, the Panthers.
Boy, TJ Sanders on a loaded defense, much like we were talking earlier about A&M. So it's like hard to know how much is exactly him. I don't love that he's 280 pounds. I wish that he were 300 doing what he does. But very disruptive player. And, on watching him live in the game, you would think he'd go higher than this.
Well, I think we skipped Ty Felton, and I don't want to skip Ty Felton. Or did I miss? I could have sworn I saw Ty Felton's
coming in a minute. Ty Felton's coming.
Okay, it flashed by me. So I thought we skipped him, and I was like, I don't want to skip that guy because I'm a fan. Holland Pierce, he physically he is a prototypical NFL tackle. Like and frankly, at the Senior Bowl, he held his own over and over and over again. I was really impressed because when you get that kind of height, that kind of length, sometimes you just don't know if they're going to get plowed easily by a lower center of gravity. But I was impressed. I did see him a couple of times that caught him off guard, but he's a good developmental tackle, and I think this is about a stage where you could start swinging at that, and start him as a swing, and then eventually let him work his way into a starting role, I would think.
Yeah, speed with bend really difficult for him, but there aren't that many guys who can do that. But he had some, if he had the bad matchup, he really had a bad matchup. So that's the thing you got to work him through and figure out a solution. With his length, he could theoretically overcome that with length, but hadn't quite figured out the hand usage yet for that. Jack Besh, the great story. Can you make a living as a outrageously good 50-50 ball guy who doesn't really get open but makes all the plays? Yes. Is that is he going to be like a superstar in the NFL? I'm not sure I would go that far, but love a lot of things about him. And as a football player, like I think he's a great football player. You may be higher on him. Your mileage may vary, Gabe.
Let's see.
Tuilamalo, JT, Tuilamalo.
Yeah. Another guy who I feel like Jack Sawyer and JT sort of like, they fed each other. I think it's going to be about a pairing with him. I don't think he's a guy who's going to dominate all by himself and that, you can just get away with, having only one dude to rush the passer. I don't think he's that guy. But I do like him a lot. I think he's a good team guy. I think he's somebody that, that you're going to, like the Broncos love Ohio State guys. I could certainly see a scenario where you bring a guy in as a rotational pass rusher like him, and he may turn into more, but that's what I kind of see him as.
And Chris Pupal is a guy that, has been on this channel being interviewed by Jim and others. And it was also another great clip with him this week about film study, about something that he picked up on a film. I feel like that's a great first step. You want to say something great about yourself to teams without bragging. You just talk about what you study and what you see when you study, because it's not just watching film. It's like, what do you glean from that and how do you apply it when you're in the game? So I think that's a very good sign for someone like Chris Paul, who has lots of other, physical talents and intangibles. So that bodes very well for him.
Yeah, and I think we are, let's see, maybe I'm just getting eager again. But
I'm sorry we're not mentioning as much about the fit for teams. It's just like we get so little time to see. I'm trying.
We made it to Ty Felton.
So Chris Paul was to Arizona, which I think is an excellent fit for them. Go ahead, Ty Felton for Houston.
Yeah, actually, Ty Felton to Houston is probably a good fit. Although they did just pick up somebody in free agency to help cover the Tank Dell, uncertainty there with his injury recovery and that type of thing. But Ty Felton, to me, he's a pretty complete receiver. I was impressed with. I'm impressed with his ability to break tackles. I was impressed with his route running. Overall, I just was he surprised me in terms of how complete his game was on the whole. He's fast. The speed shocked me at the combine. Honestly, the straight line speed was a little bit surprising to me, but that's a bonus. So if he falls this far, it won't shock me. But at the same time, I think he's gonna be a guy who, if he can play opposite somebody who is one of those 50-50 ball guys, who's able to maybe have some good breakaway speed, but come down with like a Cortland Sutton. If he can play on the opposite hash, I think he's not quite as crisp a route runner as like a Jerry Jeudy, but he's probably a better teammate. So, I think, there's a lot to like about him.
Hey, can I pause you guys for a minute? Because we only have about 8 picks to go.
Yeah.
This is your first time or maybe your second time on the channel. If you guys want to take a minute, introduce yourselves to everybody that's drafting, go ahead and take a minute.
Gabe, so go ahead. You're top billing, man. You take it.
Yeah. So my name's Gabe Morris. You'll see me most of the time on Twitter as Blue Ridge Bronco. But if you see that's who I am. Most of what you'll find me on in the, I'm going to still refer to it as Twitter. You'll find me talking about Denver Broncos stuff, but at this time of year, my spirit comes alive and I get to talk about draft related content. So I've written for predominantly Orange. I tend to, it's been a little bit since I did, overtaken by events, but Will and I, and actually Jim has been in some mock drafts with me in the past as well. Will and I came together a couple of years ago, actually a few years ago. And I put in the chat, and I think Jim passed it along to you all, an article that introduces you a little bit more to Will and gives you his background. Also gives you some insights into how personally you can go about scouting small school prospects, a little bit of a process and that type of thing. And so, that's one of the things that I really value about this channel is at Draft Professor is that it aims really to help people to sharpen their own game about some amateur and semi-professional scouting. There are some in this that you'll run into who've had some bona fide scouting experience, and there's really just a lot to be gained from the people in this channel. So yeah, thank you all for taking some of your Friday night to hang out with us, get to know a little bit about us. Thank you, Jim, for setting all of this up. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I give you Will Massasak.
Listen, if you're here, you love football, and I think that's the thing that we all have in common. Some of us go about it differently. Some of us approach it like it's our job because for them it is. And for others, we pretend it's our job. And we would love it to be our job and spend a lot of time and energy. And I appreciate Jim Wickens with all the work here with Draft Professor trying to keep this content coming and keep people engaged and interested. And Gabe, appreciate you very much. It's great always talking football with you all year round, but especially this time of the year when we're competitors in drafts where we're picking for opposite teams and whatever. I'm Will Massasak. You'll know me on Twitter as Accidental Zen. You might also know me from Steeler Fury podcast. It's the longest running Steelers Pittsburgh Steelers show in the history of the world, still going, and since 2008, when podcasts were just a twinkle in the eye. And I also do a lot of things. I have this team every year I call the B2B Directional State team of undervalued and small school prospects that I will release just about 2.5 weeks from now. And that always features a good read through for guys. If you want to know when you're watching a UFL game, who are these guys, or who got signed as undrafted free agents, or in the third day of the draft, there's a lot of those kinds of guys on there, and so you'll know a little something to tell your friends. So look out for that. And otherwise, great to be here anytime talking draft. I think we're gonna.
It's great having you both on the channel. So I want to just give a shout out. So for Will and Gabe to talk about every player at the length that they did, the amount of tape that they have to watch, to give 2 hours of entertainment, because as Gabe pointed out, we're doing this because we love it. And Will said the same thing, right? We're doing this because we love to do it.
But we failed to keep it under 2 hours, Jim, which I know it was our goal. So
the goal was 3. We're killing 3. We're good. We're good.
Right on.
I do want to promo a couple of things on the channel.
Oh, yeah,
so
please.
On Sunday, we're doing rounds 3 and 4 of a mock draft that was done on Wednesday. So on Wednesday, there were 3 of us that did a 2-round mock. So what's going to happen on Sunday is Randall, Greg, and I are going to have a war room, and we're going to discuss every single team's, like, what would we do in round 3. And if you haven't met Heather yet, she's a treat. She's going to be joining us. So it'll be Heather, Randall, Greg, myself doing a war room. So it's a similar to this, but it's different because we're brainstorming what we would do and trying to see if we converge on picks.
Sure.
So that's going to happen now every Sunday from now until the draft. So if you're sick of podcasts only covering the top 100, I get it. We've nearly every single player here you've probably heard talked about 20 times, but the round 4 guys, like how much time has like Justin Wally got this draft cycle, right? Yeah. Like we could start going just down the board. Yeah. Has Mello Dodson been talked about yet? We need to bring that content. That's who the Draft Professor is. So that's going to be every Sunday this week. It's at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Great. And by the way, here's a plug for the website. Your mock draft simulator at Draft Professor, which is very unique in several ways. One of which is that the players, your board that shows you best available changes based on which team is picking, which is very interesting. But also, for the first time this year, you have Draft a Team, which is something that I invented back in 2020, where we got super bored in the pandemic or decided we wanted, instead of picking just, for our team 1 year with 5 picks or whatever, we're going to pick an entire team of offensive and defensive players just from this year's draft, which means we had to go we did it with 21 participants, which meant that we had to go 500 players deep or more. So you now can do that with the simulator on draftprofessor.com.
Thank you for your work on that, Will. Some of the pioneering in that, because that's a lot of fun. And I'll tell you, you can't sneak by, knowing next to nothing about cornerback number 27 when you have to, find yourself filling an entire roster.
Well, this year, somebody has to find quarterback 20 and 21. Good luck.
Wow.
Don't want to miss out. It's like musical chairs. Where were we, Jim? We got a couple more. Let's end this with a bang. Come on now.
Absolutely. So you're about to get a run on running backs.
Oh yeah.
So you got Quinshon Judkins to the Colts and Cam Scatterbo to the Bengals.
Well, that's an interesting. Which guy would you have first in there, Gabe? Would you pick Scatterbo or Judkins in a vacuum?
Yeah, in a vacuum. See, I'm a huge Scatterbo fan myself. Judkins is definitely an athletic freak, but again, you heard me say before, give me team all effort, all the time. I think, if you were to just look at them athletically in a vacuum, then yes, Judkins is the guy that you're going to pick. But I am looking forward to seeing what Arizona State's pro day looks like. We didn't get to see Scatterboot run, but we did get to see his vertical, and it was pretty spectacular for a guy, at that size, and it translates. You look at it on tape. He's just as they say, a football playing Jesse. Like, he is that dude that you want on your team because, what do you need me to do? Okay, I'll do that. And then he does it. So when you start talking about people with Joker traits, he's that guy, receptions, rush yards. He'll run through you, can jump over you. It's not just dump passes in the backfield. It's go routes. He does a little bit of everything. So yeah, I'm a huge fan, but I'm also a little bit of a fanboy in that regard. So I'll leave that.
No, I actually really like Scatterbo. I would have taken him over Judkins, but I feel like this running back class is like just about whatever type you like, because
it's kind of silly.
Yeah, the first 20 of them are all pick a name out of a hat. So yeah, better just do something based on the fit or something about the intangibles. And Scatterbo's intangibles are fun, man. He's a dog, Like I think I might want to have that guy. If there's a fight, I think I might want to have him on my side. Yeah. I picked Deion Walker for the Steelers. I forgot that I was doing what the Steelers do and not what I would do, but it was also a little bit too tempting because they really desperately need the big bodies at defensive tackle. They would probably have picked who's the dude from Maryland that they love?
Jordan Phillips.
Yeah, Jordan Phillips. I think the guys that they really like are Darius Alexander and Jordan Phillips in real life. Those would be more likely Steelers picks. But Alexander won't make it to 3 now that they gave away their second. So Phillips is probably the guy they zeroed in on. I like him. I feel like he's a higher floor player maybe than Walker is. But the thing about Walker is play with a broken back this year. And he didn't miss a game with the broken back. He missed only with an infection that he got from his treatment for the broken back. And he's still he did it, he said, because he had other teammates out and they were counting on him, and he felt like he couldn't not play if he was able to suit up. So in a way, I love the character aspect of it. And if you look at what he did before this year when he had the injury problem, which is not expected to be long lasting or whatever, he, as a 19-year-old, he destroyed the SEC. So his pad level's not perfect. He had, problems with being on the field too long, whatever criticisms you want to come up with. He's 20. He just turned 21 like a day ago and is absolutely destroyed the SEC when he was healthy. So I'm taking a bet on him in the 3rd round.
Well, and that's one that you and I agree quite a bit on, Will, and we've talked about it a little bit in chat on the side. You just don't get humans that size that often. He does play upright. He does have a problem, a little bit of a problem getting low. However, he also, again, he's got all the things you can't train. So I would say, back issues and all that stuff, get him with an NFL trainer. They're going to strengthen his core. That's going to help with the rest of it. We know at college and a high school level, when they want you to put on weight, they're not necessarily looking at healthy weight, and they're not, they don't have somebody necessarily helping you do that the right way. But I think that'll make a big difference for him.
Agree. Then Harold Fannin, where did he go? He went to the Bucks, right? So
I believe so. Yes.
I love this pick for them. Fannin. Here's the thing about Fannin. Speaking of Deion Walker just turning 21, Fannon's still 20. He's going to be 20 until training camp, right? So that's not something you hear a lot about him, because usually these guys that are coming from non-Power 4 that rise up the charts and have the kind of season he did are like 25-year-olds playing against 20-year-olds, right? But Fannon's 20. Had a most gigantic year in the history of tight ends in terms of receiving. And the previous year, he was not the focal point of their offense. He was the blocker, played H-back and fullback for them. And I thought was actually a very passable blocker as an H-back. Like, as a move tight end, he's not blocking many people, but that's not really what they asked him to do this year. So I feel like there's more flexibility in his game than people talk about, and he's a better athlete than a lot of the guys at the tight end position. And he produced. I don't know what more the guy can do. He's been dropping down boards. I don't understand why.
Yeah, I'm a fan of Fannin as well. The only thing I'll say about him is nothing he can do about, he can't do anything about it. He's got a little bit of an awkward gait. But he does make plays. And, for the longest time I was trying to figure out, okay, who is the comp for me? Because, the comp sometimes can help you to figure out, how it's not the end all be all, but it can help you to figure out what it would look like at the next level. And somebody brought up to me Antonio Gates, and now I can't get that out of my head. And I think there's some real similarity there. And frankly, if that's how well you do with it, if that's your ceiling, I'm okay with that.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to say actually Shannon Sharp had a little, as I recall, had a little bit of a weird gait. He's another one.
Yeah.
So yeah. I think he's he's high waisted, which is a thing that people don't like in the NFL.
Yeah.
Old school guys. But yeah, I don't know. Like I saw what he did against Penn State. I mean, I thought he was the best looking tight end in the game against Penn State, and Warren had a huge game. So it's like, hey, it's all about the matchups and fit. If he goes to the right team, I think both of those guys can be very successful. All right. So a lot of time on them. Let's move on. Farmer to Denver, I think, is the next one.
Correct.
Yeah. So I haven't spent a lot of time on Joshua Farmer. I've spent a little time on him.
Yeah.
Will, what do you got?
He's a great player. He was probably a little bit better, as was the whole FSU defense last year. Last year, I would have had him maybe 3 or 4 spots of defensive linemen higher than I have him now. But he's still a very good player. I think he's like a little bit of a tweener between a penetrating 3 tech, but he's not quite quick enough for that, and he's not quite long or doesn't really have like the butt to be a 5 tech. But I do feel like he's in this class, he's a little lost because of all the talent, but really, really productive and can be a very disruptive player. There were times when he was the best defensive player on the field for them. That's probably getting a lot of attention, even on a team filled with a lot of talent.
Yeah, and a guy we talked about just a little bit ago, and I'll just speak to this since I'm a Broncos fan and I'm typically the one representing that side of it. Jordan Phillips to me is a guy that you might consider in this area too. We do need an interior defensive line help. We did just re-sign, DJ Jones, and DJ Jones is a phenomenal football player. This is not necessarily a replacement for that. But the draft is not just about this year. I think we oftentimes get caught up in filling gaps this year. That's free agency. That the draft is kind of the future thing, and we're looking at the next year's holes. And so next year we're going to have some interior defensive line gaps that need to be filled out. And I could, there are 4 or 5 guys that are still out there on the board that I would look at as potential fits for that. So that'll give me some homework. Go check out a little more on Joshua Farmer, and then we had somebody.
Yeah, be sure to watch some 2023. Although he was good this year as well. Yeah, Caleb Johnson. There'd be years where Caleb Johnson would be the top running back in the draft, right?
Yeah, this blows my mind.
I do think he's compared to some of the other guys we talked about, he has never really been asked to do anything in the passing game, and is a little bit of a kind of what you get runner. Like if you block it for him, he's going to get yards, and he's a big
and a lot of them
size and a lot of yards, right? So I have no problem with that kind of a player. I feel like I would mention Brian Robinson before with Washington. I think Caleb Johnson is a better player than Brian Robinson is. Yeah. As a prospect, we'll see what he does when he gets to the NFL, but he could play that role, but give you more yards and a little bit more explosion, which I think
for me with Caleb Johnson, and I'll talk on just for a second because he's one that I have quite a bit higher than where he went here. A lot of folks look at him as a little bit of a one-trick pony. For me, I think it just goes to what you just mentioned. It's similar to the discussion with Ashton Genty in the sense that that's not what he wasn't asked to do a lot of receiving. But one thing you can say about him with all the carries he had no fumbles last year. There's another guy we're going to talk about in a little bit here that falls into the opposite category. And so I think for me, as a guy who's a fan of a team who's experienced a lot of fumbles recently, with running backs and they end up on the bench pretty quickly, that's a sore point for me. But when you have that many carries, as many carries as he had in yards, and no fumbles, that's saying something. So I did watch him a little bit at the combine in the pass catching drills, and he was a natural. His hands were natural. He didn't fight the ball. I don't think that's going to be a huge problem for him. So I really think we probably only scratched the surface with what he's capable of doing. He's got outstanding vision. When he hits the hole, he hits it with authority, and he is gone. So I think it takes the right system, but in the right system, I think he's going to be phenomenal.
Yeah, definitely fit. It requires a certain fit, but can be very good. This player you saw a lot, I'm sure, wide receiver from Colorado State, Torrey Horton.
Oh yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. He honestly, if not for the injury, he'd be a lot higher up on this list than
what it really is, Gabe. He plays in the invisible zone between the Mississippi River and the Rocky Mountain. Like Vegas. Like players that play in that zone who make up 50% of my. I'll bet my directional state undervalued team. Just feels like nobody sees players from that part of the country. Important thing to note if your kid is a high school star and is recruited by somebody in that time zone. Sorry, go ahead. Talk about Horton.
No, I mean, honestly, you can't say enough nice things about Horton. If he's not, you're right on. If he's not playing at Colorado State, if he's playing at any one of the SEC schools, most of the acclaim that he has now is because, of games where he played against big schools and maybe just got a little bit of a sliver of attention for a second. But sadly, the injuries cost him some of those big games here recently, or else we'd be talking about him a lot higher than he is. But he's sure-handed. Just the combine, even after the injury, he ran a 4.4 something, which for a guy that size is pretty impressive. And he plays like that. So it's not just straight line speed. He plays that way.
One of the better ones in the class, catching away from his body and dependable hands.
He's
a skill that is not underrated. It's underrated better. It's a very important skill. Now, Femi Oladejo had a great Senior Bowl. You probably saw him there, so you could talk to that, and then I'll get to Jalen Royals for a second.
Yeah, Olufemi Oladejo is a guy that I honestly, he's a little bit underrated in this group of edge rushers, and I think it's in part because he transitioned into that role. He cleared space for one of the other guys that we already talked about here in Schlesinger not long ago, and he performed admirably in the short amount of time that he had there. So I think he's going to take a little bit of, he'll take a little seasoning until he's full-time ready to go there. But we all saw it at the Senior Bowl. He dominated his reps. It was like the speed off the line was impressive. And I think it caught a lot of people by surprise because he wasn't that big name guy where everybody kind of expected that he was going to, do what he did. Caught a few people off guard. So I think he'll kind of do that in the NFL as well.
Yeah. He was my favorite sleeper edge right now. Really like him. Royals, Jalen Royals, the wide receiver from Utah State, going to the Houston Texans. I like that as a fit for them. Although their wide receiver situation is complicated. If Tank Dell recovers, which is not 100% certainty, I guess, really bad injury that he had last year, then I could see this being very useful for them. Royals, though, he's bigger than Dell, but he doesn't have the outside game that Dell has. Royals is a catch and run guy. He's very similar to Luther Burton that we discussed earlier, a guy that his main skill is, man, you get him the ball quickly and in space with a blocker, he can house it, right? The guy is amazing with picking through traffic once he has the ball in his hand. So he's a yards after catch specialist. He's good at other aspects of the game, but that's primarily how they used him, and he was very successful at it.
Yeah, and he did come up big in big games. I think, the one that I watched him against, I think it was Boise State. That was one of his bigger games. And frankly, that's a question when you're Utah State. How do you do against teams that team ended up in the playoffs and whether or not you think they ought to have, they did. And he played admirably. So didn't we see the Texans, didn't they draft a wide receiver not very long ago? Was that Ty Felton?
So I think the admin screwed up there because Brandon was in the chat and he wanted to make a different pick. And I didn't realize that it was Houston's third round pick. So
hey,
not trying to call you out, Jim. Just
guys for us.
I'll call myself out. That happens at least once or twice every time we do these. And like Brandon, you are the most loyal follower we have. Brandon is here. We have 2 podcasts a night, right?
Yeah, 3 rounds.
He's at every single one of them. Every single one. So Brandon, I owe you. I don't know what I owe you, but I
wouldn't
owe
be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised that if in the last 25 years in the draft, it's happened to NFL teams at least once or twice that they forgot who they drafted or something like.
Didn't we do that already? Yeah.
Yeah, or like they thought that somebody was at a different spot on the board and they skipped over someone else. Like it's not impossible, right? Even with everybody watching, just shit happens. Sorry, people like to say.
But they got Royals and Felton in the third round. And just to give you guys an idea, we have one pick left. But look at the wide receivers that are still here.
Oh, yeah.
Between Kyle Williams and Pat Bryant and Dante Thornton, and then Efton Chisholm is still here. Ja'Cory Brooks is still here.
We haven't even picked or looked at or talked about at any point, as far as I know, on this podcast over the last few weeks of doing this, at the player that I think is, if there's a Puka Nacua type in this class, he's it. And I'm not going to tell you who it is. This is a tease. I'm in a giant mock draft coming up, and I'm not going to tell the world until we pick him in the mock draft. But I can tell you right now, he is a player that hasn't showed up yet, that has barely, if at all, been discussed as a top 100 player. Yep. So you're going to want to hear that. Essentially.
I'd like to offer a couple things for the audience. So Will and I have known each other for a while. He podcasts occasionally with us. But one of the reasons is he doesn't want to tell me who his favorite players are. So that when we mock draft against each other, I don't snipe it.
Yeah, I have this problem. On Steeler Fury, people are always asking me about prospects or this, that, and the other, and I'm like, I am going to be going against all of you guys in a mock draft in a couple of months. I'm not telling you anything about anything. I'd be the NFL GM who refused to tell anybody anything about who I was seeing. I would lie, put out misinformation. Right. That's what I should do on this show. I should use this platform to lie about players that I don't actually like. So anyway, I'll do that.
Or we tell everybody to show up April 12th, because April 12th, Will and Anthony Russo are going to be doing rounds 4 through 7 of our 32-team mock. So you're going to be able to see who Will likes.
Yeah,
but you have to wait until the very end of the draft cycle.
Yeah, and I'm picking
then you'll catch it on this podcast.
I'm picking for the Pittsburgh Steelers with our own war room that we're going to record for our podcast, for the Steelers Ferry podcast, with my co-hosts Jeremy Coleman and Corey Korbowski. So we will not only talk about all the players that we're considering and fight about them and whatever, but then we'll also have to pick some for a live draft on this channel. So yes, be here for that, April 12th. Anyway, so let's see. Knight, the linebacker from South Carolina, as if South Carolina needs another player in the draft. Oh my God, their team is so loaded this year. I cannot believe that that loss to LSU knocked them out of potentially winning the whole college football playoff, I think. Do you know Demetrius Knight, Gabe? You must see him down in your neck of the woods a little bit. Oh, we lost Gabe. Knight, I like Knight a lot as a downhill. He's to me, he's a 2-down, or what used to be a 2-down linebacker in the NFL. And I feel like if you're in goal line, you're in run situations, he's an excellent player in this class. He's probably the best sort of pure downhill linebacker as far as what I think of him. I'm a fan at this point, especially for the Rams. They could use that. Andrew Makuba, the safety from Texas, goes to the Ravens. This is a sort of low-key. The Ravens need a flexible safety. Last year, they had to play Hamilton back because they couldn't rely on other safety, so that this really helps them. And I think we could, good tester. I'm not sure where the right spot for, right usage for him is in the NFL, but it feels like he's a good for a team that likes to swap the roles of their safeties. He could be a deep cover guy, especially in split field, and he can also be close to the ball if need be. Gabe, are you back with us?
Yep, I think I'm back.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah. I'll give a shout out to Josh. One of the draft professors is a Ravens fan. He'll mock Makuba to the Ravens in round 2. So the fact that they got him in round 3 on Josh's board, that's actually really good value.
Yeah, that feels pretty good. Like I said, the safety population in this draft for guys who are not really close to the line or box players is not huge, right? So I think there are a couple of players who will emerge in the process who are corners that'll be thought of more as guys that play a lot of zone and off-ball coverage and will be converted to safeties and maybe very good prospects. But there aren't a lot of like free safety types. I don't think the college game doesn't really suit talents there. Like you wouldn't want to have your most talented guy as a deep middle field safety in college because of all the quick game and space with the hashes being spread out.
Yeah, but it's crazy, isn't it, to look at a defensive backfield that contains Makuba and Barron, on the same field. I mean, honestly, it's no wonder they won a lot of games.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, that was their alley defender and their nickel corner for last year, right? So that to me is like in the college, that's more important in a way than your outside corners.
Yeah, that was one of the most vicious clean hits that you saw in all of college football this past season was Makuba this past season. So
yeah, indeed. And then is it Josiah Stewart? Josiah Stewart from Michigan, the edge rusher. Little bit of a thin frame, probably going to be bigger and stronger as an NFL player, but man, does he flash on tape. Oh, I think I might have frozen Gabe again.
No, there I am. I'm back. Okay. Yeah. No, I would agree. I think, just because edge is such a strong need for teams, typically I wouldn't be shocked to see him pushed up a little bit farther than what he is right here. But yeah, he has flashes of dominance, which you'd expect from somebody, starting in a school at that caliber. But yeah, not quite special enough for me that I would see him as a real value much sooner than this, but I think we're about at the right spot for him.
Yeah. And Bashil Tootin, you alluded to him earlier, the fumbling problem. I think he's got 10 fumbles in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And if not for the fumbles, I'm not sure how much different he is from Ashton Genty. I mean, he's like that. He is a tremendous football player, and he's got, unbelievable speed, and he's very tough and has a low center of gravity and like good contact balance, everything. It's just fumbling is one of those things that will just kill your NFL career.
Yeah. And if I'm an NFL, defensive coordinator, all of my pregame, preparations with my team are going to include that scouting report right there.
No, he needs the 4 points of contact, and he needs Jerome Bettis's rubber sleeve. Like he needs to just pull out all the stops and stop worrying about it. Like once you sort of have all of those things, you carry the football around for a year, 4 points of contact, rubber sleeve, you probably Le'Veon Bell was a guy that I think early in his college career had some fumbling issues, and he went to the rubber sleeve gig, and it seemed to really help him. So did not fumble at all in the NFL.
Yeah, and so Dylan Sampson, I think we're to Dylan Sampson, is that right? You see him mocked a lot higher than where he is right now. In some, like for instance, Pro Football Focus has him rated a lot more highly than what I would expect for him typically. There's a lot to like about his game. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I think there really is. It's just that similar to the problem that we've talked about before. For those who haven't been in our chats, we actually talked about the possibility of doing an entire draft of nothing but running backs and interior defensive linemen just because of the depth of those positions. And there's so much taster's choice to the running back position and the interior defensive lineman that you could make an argument for a different 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, just depending on who you're talking to and who, which team you happen to be scouting for them. But Dylan Sampson is a well-rounded back, did real well in the combine. There was a lot to like about his, he's got good feet. He's got good burst. There's a lot to like about him, but
didn't Dylan Sampson, wasn't he just in the draft coming from Tennessee last year? I'm joking with like Jalen Wright.
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
I feel like it's like a very similar guy. He went 4th round. I could see that, a little bit better running back class this year. Dylan Sampson for me is probably somebody that comes off the board 5th, 5th round. But the thing is, it's only because of the amount of running backs. I'm sure that there's a fit for him someplace, and Cleveland might in fact be it. Jacob Parrish from Kansas State showed very well at the Senior Bowl. I'm not sure. Where do you guys think? Is he an outside corner? Is he a nickel? Is he a safety? I feel like he could be any of those things.
So the Broncos are scouting him right now. I mean, they've So if you know anything about the way Sean Payton operates, if you hear about it, it's probably not happening. And so, but there's been a lot of conversation about Jacob Parrish anyway. I think if they're the way that you can really see that there's fire to the smoke is more about which positions they happen to be scouting. And so I bring that to the table to simply say they're going to be looking at nickel guys. I mean, we've got Riley Moss on one side who held up very well toward the, in the early part of the year until the injury, and then he'll get back to that form. And then of course, I mean, we Patrick Surtain is another level, but nickel is an area where I think they feel they could do an upgrade. And I think that's where they're looking at him is more in the nickel category.
Yeah. Kevin Winston to the Eagles. I feel like, I don't know, did the Eagles take a corner earlier in this draft? Is that what happened?
They did. They took Noel Williams at the end of round 2, and they took Kevin Winston.
I like Noel Williams, but I'm not sure about Noel Williams as the fit for what they need there. I think they need a slot. So that's the only
the chat let me know that I made the wrong Eagles pick.
Okay. Kevin Winston, because I think Dejan is going to play outside now. They cleared the path by getting rid of Slay. Kevin Winston is one of those cats that's like I don't know. I feel like watching safety, call it, prospects who are safeties, who are deep safeties primarily, or play a lot of deep safety, are very hard to evaluate because you absolutely have to have all 22 to even get a feel for what they're about, what they're doing. And I also think it's very difficult to know what their role, what their responsibility is on plays without knowing what the play call is. It's one of those, I don't know. That's hard. You have to be either really familiar with defensive back play or the scheme that they're playing, or you have to really, be a mind reader in a way. But Kevin Winston, I think it's a lot of play as a guy that is athletic and has long arms that can erase the deep balls. So he is, there's a guy, Billy Bowman for Oklahoma, who I think would be an excellent free safety candidate in terms of his range and instincts and whatever, but he doesn't really have super length. And so the knock on him is that on the deep balls, he can get to those deep balls, but he can't necessarily make plays that guys who have more length can get to. So I think for free safeties these days in the NFL, they're looking for guys that have a little bit more length. So Winston has that, but he isn't exactly a guy that fills the stat sheet or pops a ton on tape. But I have a feeling that he could be very valuable for a team that's just looking for someone in the back end to settle things down and not give up big plays.
Yeah, I mean, Malachi Moore is going to get drafted because he played at Alabama, but I do think that there are probably some safeties we haven't talked about yet that are a little less heralded that maybe would be in consideration. I can see the need in that, you can't, their starting safety who's been there for 13 years is not going to keep playing forever. Eventually he's going to want to go home. So I would think, it makes sense. It does make sense to draft a replacement, and even makes sense to draft a replacement a little bit later on like this, so that, sitting behind the scenes is not going to so much hurt your reputation. You're going to benefit from it. But I'd have to take a look and see what the rest of the safety class looked like to figure out whether or not that would be the route I'd go. I see the positional value.
Malachi Moore from Alabama. Me personally, I think he's the opposite of Winston in terms of the length. He's a shorter arm, shorter guy. I think he's going to end up being a slot, like a nickel in the NFL. But, I think the problem with being a nickel, because of your physical limitations, it doesn't work if you're not good against the run and you're not aggressive. You can't blitz. You can't do the other stuff that nickels are required to do. So he might move around in a defense. It might be an effective fifth defensive back. But I'm not super high on him, but I can see why people like him. He's can be a part of a good team. And then Zach or Gabe, I'm not sure if you can see Miranda Gadsden to Miami. That feels like a match made in heaven.
Yeah. Well, for a lot of reasons. I think there's a natural lineage kind of thing there, but I think at the same time he is he is kind of the new wave of wide receiver converted to tight end. I mean, we just talked about one a little bit ago that the Broncos picked up in free agency and Evan Ingram. And I think, that's kind of what you hope to get out of a player doing that. But he's not unnatural in the weight that he carries right now. So it's not the kind of thing where he was quite as much a tweener in my mind as some of the others who've tried to make that leap. Little Jordan Humphrey, for instance, is getting ready to try to make that jump over from wide receiver to tight end. Sure. And it's a lot to ask somebody to do that at the next level, but he's already kind of made that jump for all intents and purposes. So I think he's a good pick at this point.
Here's a little note about these conversions from wide receiver tight end. If you have to convert to tight end because you're too slow or you ate too much, that's not a good conversion. But Gaslam was just like a wide receiver. It was just so big. They were like, we can use you as a big slot and occasionally line you up more like a tight end and you could have some success. So I think he's more of the really great athlete who just happens to be bigger rather than a guy even like Jawan Johnson just got so big that they were like, well, I guess you're going to be a tight end now. But
Gaston didn't run at the combine, did he? I don't think he did.
I don't think he did, no, but I suspect he's pretty fast for a big guy. So he should get a lot of advantages as a big slot guy with size who can move like that and catch the ball. I think is very effective. Next player is one of those big combine winners, Zaf Frazier from UTSA to the Giants. Got to love the potential. He's 6'3", 186 pounds, almost 33-inch arms. I watched a lot of UTSA, and he's it's like he feels raw in the sense that, you'll see him make a bad play occasionally. He's not that guy that has the perfect record as a cornerback, but you see those athletic gifts, you just don't get that every day in corners. Ran 4.36 with a 151 split. I mean, that is for a big corner, a tall corner, like we talked earlier about Porter, that's pretty impressive. He's maybe not the mover that Porter is, and maybe not as good a football player, tackling or whatever, but I do feel like there's a potential for him. More Richard Sherman than Porter is.
That's a good neighborhood. Yeah, Isaiah Bond, to me, he's a little bit brash. He is, he's an explosive athlete. He's definitely here at pick 100 early on in the season. You see him getting mocked pretty routinely in the first round without, much question. And so I think he cost himself by kind of, his mouth wrote checks his body couldn't cash in a sense. And I'm sure his agent has probably given him, some thoughts about how he might have done differently there. But this is a value at this point with San Francisco specifically. I don't know that he fits the culture of what they would typically look for. They've got a pretty defined personality that they look for, and you see that they kind of tend to get rid of folks who cause problems pretty quickly. So that's one that, again, go back and watch his combine interview. You'll get it's more than just the call in his shot and missing it. We've all done that in time. But I think you get a little bit of a feel there's maybe some maturity issues there that might have helped to push him to this point.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I feel like it also wouldn't surprise me if he ran in the 4.2s at Pro Day. I don't know, man. Having done testing and athletic events,
you're still playing, man.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, I can tell you that even at the sort of when I was, more of a, normal aged athlete, that the difference between your good days and bad days for anybody is quite a lot of difference when it comes to this kind of testing. There's not much difference there's really not that much difference between 4.29 and 4.5. It's it's unlikely that, a guy who really runs in the 4.2s is going to run 4.5, but I think Bond has run officially recorded 40s under 4.3. So it wouldn't surprise me if for some reason he just had a really bad day or didn't, shoes didn't fit right or something that is just so small in the overall scheme of things. But on the other hand, that's what the reason that you do the test at the combine is because it's you're forced to compete at that time, at that moment. It's like a professional thing. You can't have a bad day in the NFL. You have to show up consistently, and that's a valuable attribute to have. Bothers me that fewer and fewer guys are doing drills at the combine. And I feel like it's less about, for us fans, we want to measure them and whatever, and more about I just want to see them compete and do stuff there. If you're legitimately injured, it's one thing.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's I would rather have a guy who has to perform and raises his performance to the level that he needs to outshine even what he thought he was going to do. And guys do that, and I note it when they do, and they're like, "Oh my God, I ran better and I jumped higher than I ever thought." Like Landon Jackson was the guy who literally said that. He was just like, these were the benchmarks that I had from training, and I outdid all of them. I don't know how I did it, So I'd rather have that guy performing.
Yeah, and to that point, it's also a bit of a travesty for some of these guys who didn't get the invite that really, could have shown up. Like you look at a guy like Efton Chisholm, for instance. I mean, I for all the people who didn't show up or showed up and stood on the sidelines, at least give a shot to the guys who would have come to compete. At least, if you want to stand on the sidelines, great, but let's at least give their spot up to somebody and let them prove their worth, show that they could hold up. So, yeah, that's a good sidebar. NFL, if you tend to watch these things at a later point, we'll take that under advisement.
I don't know if the NFL watches the podcast, but we have players that watch the podcast.
Yeah, that's
there.
True.
You go.
The way we interviewed Chris Paul is because his dad watched the podcast.
There you go.
Luke Tandra's family watches this podcast.
Outstanding. Hopefully the Princely and Prince's family watches this since they're following. But hey, listen, I would say the solution is that you create a sort of an NIL market for testing at the combine that's sponsored by somebody who literally gives out awards for testing or maybe
that's
players.
A great idea.
Players.
Oh my God, that's a great idea, Will.
Yeah, players submit ahead of time what they expect to do in all the tests, and then the people that exceed the most get a certain award or whatever. And I feel like you make it a financial reward. It will incentivize in a way for some people anyway. Maybe not for your top picks. Your top 5 picks are like there's no benefit to them really, other than as a competitor or trying to break the record or whatever. Quincy Riley. We're almost done, audience. We're going to get there. Quincy Riley, cornerback from Louisville, goes to the Rams. Riley, to me, is a straight-up man corner. I don't think you want to put him where he has to think in zone coverage, which is a skill that most really good athletes who are corners don't know when they're in college. It's rare because their whole lives they've been like, "Oh, you're the best athlete. You just go cover this guy." So it's a rare thing. So I'm not going to really hold that as a knock against him. I think he's a pretty good corner, but I do feel like he needs a sort of simplified role. I'm not really sure what the Rams are doing as far as their scheme. I know there's ways to find that out, and I've seen them play. I just off the top of my head, I can't recall if they're really running a lot of man, but if they are, it can be a really good fit, especially at this point.
Yeah, and I think that's the last thing you just said is the exact point. When you get to the bottom of the third round, I think, we typically would say first, second, and third round, your value is that we expect you to have significant playing time of some kind if you're in that first, obviously, second, pretty obviously, third, more than likely that you're going to see some time on the field. But as you get to the very bottom of this here, you are starting to throw darts and just keep somebody else from getting them at the top of the next round, or making a trade ahead of you in the next round. So,
well, that's a good segue because you guys are on the clock for Detroit right now.
I knew that was coming.
And they have taken Nick Scourton and Marcus Bowe. So this will give the audience, we're going to tease them. This is what it's going to be like on Sunday. So okay. What are you guys thinking that Detroit would do here at the end of round 3?
Let's see. I got a little list here of the what people have been picking for teams, but I'm not trying. I was trying to figure out what their needs would be. But before we even get into that,
oh man,
do anybody know who Detroit's backup quarterback is?
Yeah, it's Hendon Hooker, I think.
Oh, it's Hooker. Yeah. Okay. So they got somebody.
Yeah, he's a good that's a good promising kind of backup.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what you want to have for a backup for a team that's good like they are.
Well, so the QBs that are there are McCord, Ewers. Would you guys go Hennigan this early?
I more than most, and it's a good fit for Detroit, but I don't think they need a quarterback. quarterback, really. Like I said, the big thing is just they're such a good team that you wouldn't want their season to be derailed by having to go to a backup quarterback who can't play. And I think Hooker would actually be pretty effective as a short-term, backup starters. So I like that. I guess I go to the page.
You sorted that like you read my mind. Jim, I like, to me, I kind of look at.
I don't know, Gabe, you got any thoughts about Detroit's team?
Yeah, I do.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
It's like picking for the team that has everything. But I'm trying to figure out if they lost somebody.
Somebody's audio is lagging.
I can't remember.
So we're talking over each other.
Can you hear me?
I feel like I've lost
everybody.
Am I still on?
You're on, but Will, something happened to your mic.
Yeah.
Your mic changed. It doesn't sound like it did for the first 3 hours.
Hey there, guys. Can you still hear me?
I can hear you. It's just like very high.
I see what happened. I'm muted. Sorry about that. Sorry, my headphones kicked on accidentally. Yeah, well, my headphones kicked on accidentally, so it's okay. All right, now I got my Detroit targets.
Can y'all hear me?
I got you, Nels. Sorry about that, guys. Rough. We almost made it to the end of the show without any technical difficulties.
I dropped. I was the first one to offend. So.
Right on. Detroit, where are you here? Okay, here we go. So defensive line, linebacker, wide receiver, interior offensive line, edge.
Yeah,
they get Scourton.
They already got Scourton
and Bo. All right, so
do you like?
I'm looking at wideout
at the end of round 3.
Yeah, the name that you have highlighted is an outstanding fit for them, and that might be the guy that I would say. I think linebacker's a little bit of need for them, and Danny Stutzman from Oklahoma, I feel like is miles lower than he probably ought to be in the rankings. But there's so many defensive linemen and other defensive players, and such a shortage of cornerbacks that are going to push them up. But I would take.
I was going to ask, could you pull wide receiver too? Just to look at that same.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because
I like Pat Bryant here. I like Kyle Williams.
Yeah, Andrew Armstrong is another
might be
one.
A round early. Ricky White.
Yeah, I don't think there's any round early at pick 100.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like Andrew Armstrong quite a bit. And let's see, Pat Bryant that you showed before. But right there, if we hadn't already had Scourton taken off the board, Kyle Kennard is a guy that, super explosive edge rusher. I mean, honestly, South Carolina's defense on the whole, that's just a brutal bunch of butt kickers right there. Like it was at every level there was somebody who was pretty intense. So but we already got edge taken there. I like linebacker.
It looks like they lost a cornerback in free agency, so maybe that's a place to look. I think they lost DJ Reed, so maybe we should be looking at a corner.
Jabbar Muhammad is Kobe Bryant is another one.
Yeah, Kobe's a slot and a really good one. Yeah, I think in the NFL. Fortune's going to be a safety. I'm sorry, say that again.
Is Branch slot or is Branch safety for them?
I don't know. I think they use him both ways.
Yeah, I think he's like a big nickel kind of guy.
I feel like they need outside corner is what's really. If they lost an outside corner, they don't have a ton of those guys. Because they tried and fill with Cam Sutton. He didn't make it, and then they had DJ Reed there, but yeah, I feel like they're right now they have Amik Robertson and Rackstraw as their two main corners they have.
I do like Jabbar Muhammad.
I could buy that. It might be at this point better to fill a big need than to do with anything else. Tommy Hill was injured at the Senior Bowl, but as an outside corner, he's pretty good. I think maybe Muhammad. I've without looking at my board. I don't know. What's the kid that? Well, Whaley out of Minnesota, and then the Iowa corner would be the other two sort of in this conversation.
A couple of questions. So Detroit took corner back-to-back round 1 and 2 last year, right?
Yeah, they did.
So what am I missing? Maybe
Straw, and I forgot who they took in round 1.
Well, that's what I was just looking at. Maybe I'm just looking at their chart wrong. Oh, I see. Yep, Terrion Arnold. I'm sorry. I'm looking at it.
There it is.
I was looking at the right corner and the nickelback and not at the left corner side. So, yeah. But they still don't really have an outside. I mean, Rickenstraw, I guess, could be their starter out there, but I'm not 100% sold on that.
Well, so their starting interior linebacker, inside linebacker is Jack. What's his name from Iowa?
Jack Campbell and Anzalone are, I think, pretty good.
Yeah. I don't think so. So I don't think linebackers. I mean, that's
I don't know why that was listed as a desired position. But they also have Malcolm Rodriguez and Josh Pascal. I mean, Derek Barnes. Rather, they're set.
Wideout is what really
sticks out. Jamison Williams.
What's that?
Do you think the Lions would extend Jamison Williams?
He doesn't feel like a Lion to me, honestly. Like the guy that they just re-signed in Tim Patrick feels more like a Lion than Jamison Williams does.
Yeah.
And when I look at that prototype, the guy that Pat Bryant is the guy that really, sticks out as he looks like a Lion. I was disappointed in his 40 time because the tape doesn't show that, but I don't think his game is predicated on that. So I don't really feel like that's a huge knock. And I do believe his pro day will probably show differently. He'll probably end up in the 4.5s, at the pro day. And for a guy that of that profile, that doesn't concern me. Like
I could see Kyle Williams from Washington State fitting that model, but I suspect that Pat Bryant fits better for Detroit in terms of, they like their guys to be able to block and do multiple things, and he probably fits that mold better. And that seemed like a more of a need. Andrew Armstrong also would not be a bad choice in that regard.
Yeah. Okay. Andrew Armstrong, Jamison Williams, in some ways, that's sort of a, there's a little bit of a familiarity to the game when you watch, but Andrew Armstrong is a lot more complete, than Jamison Williams. Love his game.
I think Andrew Armstrong can make your quarterback look better than
I love his
Williams.
Game. He's just fun to watch. He's really fun to watch.
Jamison Williams is not a great ball tracker, so it's like, he can get open deep, but if you don't have a quarterback that can really deliver it, you can make it look worse than it is.
Yeah,
that's how I feel about him. But I like. You take Pat Bryant. Is that the choice you made? That's a good choice.
I did.
That's a good choice.
I didn't want. I mean, we probably could have stayed here and talked about the pick for another 30 minutes.
We don't need to do all that. But don't need to overthink it. We still didn't pick my this year's Puka Nacua, but you'll have to come back on the 12th and find out.
You got to come back on April 12th.
That's the tease.
That's
right. That is definitely the tease, gentlemen. It's been quite a pleasure. Gabe and Jim had a great time.
Yeah,
hope it was not too boring to hear about all of those players for 3 hours.
Yes.
Oh, this is like my favorite night of the week. Like, it's awesome, even though it's pretty much the same players that are talked about every week. Hearing it from different people is how my brain is wired. I need to hear the same thing from different people to realize what's consensus and what isn't. So, like, I live for this. I love it.
Gabe would be the first to tell you, I hate the idea of consensus. I don't think anybody's board should be the same. I can't understand how it could be. So,
cool. Yeah, amen.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night. Enjoy your weekend.
All right, bye-bye.